Good morning. I'm pleased to see so many of you here today. This is a really important event, and the fact that we have Deliyanakis from the European Commission here with us today, I think signals a really positive, encouraging aspects to our European collaborations. I apologise for my voice today. I'm suffering from quite a bad cold, but I felt it's really important for me to attend from the Department of Business, Innovation and Industrial Strategy, Energy and Industrial Strategy. I do apologise. We are not expecting any fire alarms today, so please, if the alarm does go off, please just exit following the nearest signs. I'm sure you've all found the coffee, but toilets and other facilities are downstairs if you head towards the front. So why are we here today? UK has a strong history of collaborating with European partners on science and innovation, and our ambition is that this should continue today. So it's really important that we continue to explore the work programmes with the Commission, and that our research and innovation community continue to work on collaborative projects with partners in the European Union. Within government, we are working with the EU towards a mutually beneficial future relationship on research and innovation, which allows for continued collaboration with our European partners. We've set out our ambition for our future relationship with Europe in the white paper, which was published in July, and in it we stated our commitment to establishing a far-reaching science and innovation accord with the European Union. As part of this accord, we're aiming for a more strategic approach towards continued collaboration, to build on existing activity and to develop new forms of cooperation. We want to continue to working alongside European partners in key programmes, and wish to explore association to Horizon Europe, which is the next multi-annual framework programme. Until our departure from the European Union, we remain a fully paid-up member state, with all the rights and obligations that entails. Important work is being done by our researchers, universities and innovative businesses, and that must continue throughout this period and beyond. We strongly encourage you to continue to take these opportunities and the bilateral events that Innovate UK set up in collaboration with the European Union to meet new partners, to facilitate that ongoing collaboration. It is, it's essential for our ongoing economic activity. So last year, the government agreed a guaranteed funding for UK organisations that had made successful bids before our exit from the European Union in March next year. This guarantee has been extended, and the Treasury will guarantee funding for UK organisations which successfully bid directly to the European Commission through Horizon 2020 until the end of this budget period, even if a deal is not agreed. This will give potential applicants continued confidence to bid for funding, whatever the outcome of negotiations, and ensure that UK organisations continue to benefit from funding post-exit. Craig Sharp from Innovate UK will say more about this later. So specifically here today, we're here to talk about the launch of the latest NMBP work programme and the 2019 Cool Topics. I think we'll also hear a little bit about the indicative plans for 2020 and beyond. What we have here is a wealth of experience from all sides, many people who are ready to share their insights with you, from the Commission, from national experts from Innovate UK, evaluators, and I'd say not least your peers who have been involved for many years, some of them, in collaborative European projects. Please do make full use of the opportunities this day affords you. Last week, for instance, I was talking to project officers actually from DG Connect about recent calls in the ICT work programme. Now, we were mainly talking about some of the sort of near misses and failures in some quite competitive call areas, and obviously some of the obvious failings for poor performance are not reading the criteria for calls correctly. But really, when it came down to right at the top performing projects and the differences between what was making a difference, some of it was just sort of looking at things like citing the latest research, and when they said the latest research, they were really looking at the last few weeks. So it's keeping yourself up to date, keeping your applications as they move forward up to date. But you'll hear a lot more insight from colleagues that will be speaking later. So without further ado, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Nicholas Deliyanakis from the European Commission's DG Research. Thank you, Nicholas.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this introduction, Liz, and I can only echo your words. I would add that Horizon 2020 and the success of the previous framework programs would have been less effective and less successful were it not for a very strong involvement of the UK in this program. So I would also encourage you to make the most of Horizon 2020 and in due course Horizon Europe as well. Now today, as Liz said, I will talk about the 2019 topics of the NMBP part of the work program, which is the Industrial Technologies part of Horizon 2020. And although I don't have a slide on that, I will also say a few words, as Liz said, about what might happen in 2020, or at least what our thinking is about it. So let me start first with a number of slides which try to explain where the various topics come from. I think it is very important to understand, for any potential proposer to understand that, partly because it helps you make it would help you make a better proposal on the one hand, partly because you, if and when you are funded, you can be more effective in pursuing your project and reaping the fruit afterwards. Because of course, projects are not only about the funding. They are about innovation, the innovation that happens afterwards. So it all comes from the 10 European policy priorities, President Juncker's priorities, and 4 of these we serve directly through in our DG Research and Innovation. And these are, of course, to boost jobs and investment. And if you heard the President's State of the Union speech, he actually started and finished his speech by talking about industry and investment. So this part of the work program, I dare say, is directly linked to that. And research and innovation are, needless to say, essential parts of that. And the other 3 priorities that we serve directly through research and innovation funding are the digital single market, and increasingly you will find digital not only in the ICT part, but everywhere. Then the climate action and energy policy, and finally make Europe a stronger global actor through international cooperation in project and also through funding for our values, the values that we want to project in the rest of the world, like climate action. Our own Commissioner Moedas has also 3 priorities that are about open innovation and open science and open to the world, and these are also served through the the framework program and the successive work programs. Now, more recently, there are two pieces of policy that are important, and I would suggest that you read them because they are good reading, and I think it's useful reading also. One is a renewed industrial policy that appeared just over a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. And since 2017, we have been organizing industry days in February, and the next one is on the 5th and 6th February 2019, and we would encourage you to participate there, on those days. There is also a high-table industrial roundtable to help us strategy. Group whom we asked to rethink about our approach to industrial enabling technologies. The Commissioner Moedas asked this group, Professor who has also been Minister for Research, to the industrial policy and how this has been translated into support for key enabling technologies, and to see whether we need an approach. So on the one hand, they have written a very nice report, which I would encourage you to read. There is a link at the bottom of the slide. And on the one hand, they asserted the importance of research into technologies because they enable applications and they make companies. And so the one hand, on the other hand, they added activity in cybersecurity as new as the existing key enabling technologies. So you can expect that in the future the work programs might be formed by that. And please do read that report because it is well written, and I haven't written it myself, so I'm about it. It is very well written, and it has very interesting thoughts for the future. Now, this is the background. There are a number of figures, I'm not going to read them all, that show that industry is still very important in the EU, and that it deserves support. So with 2 million companies, 7 trillion euros turnover, and a big investment in R&D, and a large user of key enabling technologies. So for all these reasons, this of our part of the work program. That is why the research is not only about energy and about health, all those obvious challenges, but also about industry. And in the future, if you have read the Commission's proposals for Horizon Europe, seen that industry is even more closely integrated with what are now called global challenges. So they are seen, some people ask, where is industry in Horizon Europe? And the answer is, it is even tightly integrated, because of course it had to be. Now, the challenges we tried to solve partially through the funding of the work program, but not only, is the fact that competition moves very fast, that often European companies might be conservative in adopting technologies. We are certainly, you've heard this many times before, we are good in science and in patenting, but less good in using it in companies within the EU, using the technologies in companies within the EU. Young companies find financing very hard because banks tend to be conservative, especially when it comes to technologies they don't understand. There is a need for ecosystems, and as you will see, we are making a contribution to try to address that. Then there is a need for new skills, and again, we do our bit to address that. And finally, there is a need on top of the public funding, which is indispensable. There is a need for private funding. So when we help spend public money, we in general look for private investments as well. So the general question for us is how can we help industry invest and create jobs in Europe through the funding of the framework program. And this is quite an interesting exercise because the framework program funding accounts for something between 5 and 10% of all R&D funding in Europe. So it's not a lot, but we are looking for much leverage. And to do that, we partly try to improve the design of the work program, the impacts we ask for, but a lot of it relies on you. To have the impact, only you can develop the impact after the end of the projects, and that is essential because 5 or 10% in itself of R&D funding doesn't change the landscape, but it changes the landscape when it fosters cooperation, networking, further innovation after the project. So that is crucial. Please do not see the EU as a funding agency. Of course, that is part of our job, but there is much more to it than that, and that is why I'm giving you this policy primer, if you like. So here is a structure for those who are not already familiar with it. Horizon Europe is about excellent science. And the second pillar is about industrial leadership, and that is where we sit for the time being. In industrial, in turn has 3 finance and the leader has in turn NMBP, what introduced closely. Now in remain societal challenge in Europe. And the idea is to have parts that are more closely connected than has been the case so far. Now, under Horizon 2020, what we have been doing over the years, starting in 2014, the first year of this framework program, is to develop activities by talking to industry, by following industrial roadmaps, not blindly, of course, but critically, to strengthen the industrial capacities, the infrastructures that are available to SMEs, to enable them to innovate. So we started with pilot lines and demonstrators, and more recently with test beds, and I will say a few words about those as well. And finally, we place a lot of emphasis on impact. Now, that is not unique to the NMBP part. Impact is mentioned everywhere, except in the excellence part, which is, of course, based on funding excellence in its own right. But apart from that, in all other parts of the framework program, both under the societal challenges and under industrial leadership, impact is very important. So over the years, we have done a lot of work to explain impact better and make sure that we follow it up in order to ensure that our investments are effective. So impact is something that is very often misunderstood, and I will say a few words about that very soon. But at this point, I just want to say that it is crucial. It is as important as excellence when it comes to the to the, if you like, roadmap-based parts of the work program. In other words, virtually everything other than the Marie Curie fellowships, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie part, and the European Research Council. Impact is hugely important. The other thing we've done, we focused in the past, in previous work framework programs, we tended to be a bit broader in terms of our coverage of the technology, the technology readiness levels. In Horizon 2020, on the other hand, we have tried to focus a bit more on the medium to high technology readiness levels in order to address a problem many call the valley of death. So we have concentrated on TRLs taking technologies beyond the lab to the point where they become directly applicable to industry. That is where we tend to operate. So from the TRLs 3 or 4 to 6 and 7, up to 7 in a few cases. And at the same time, we ask for proposers to come up with business cases and exploitation strategies. More of that later. And the total budget is 3.8 billion over the 7 years from 2014 to 2020, roughly 500 million a year, a bit more now in the last 3 years, 550 million a year. This is a scale of TRLs, and the dark blue, the medium blue band is where we tend to operate. And this covers validation and demonstrations in operational or industry relevant environments. But we stop at TRL 8 because there we expect private funding and financing to kick in. Now, much of our funding, roughly half of the total funding in NMBP, is channeled through the so-called contractual public-private partnerships. These are partnerships with industry whereby we undertake to support the industrial roadmaps that they come up with, and in return, they undertake to make further investments. And the topics are developed and implemented not through a different institution, as is the case with the so-called joint undertakings, but through normal calls and topics in the work program. So about half of our work program part, the NMBP part, goes to the 3 or 4 contractual public-private partnerships that we support. But otherwise they work like normal topics. And again, the idea is to enhance impact. So on the one hand, we give industry the topics that it tells us are important to it, and on the other hand, we expect industry to make further investment. And if you look at the contractual arrangements, they set out leverage factors between 4 and 10. In other words, they promise that the private investment will be 4 to 10 times more than the public investment that goes into the projects. So even when you see topics that are 100% funded as part of these PPPs, it doesn't mean that there is no private funding, but the private funding comes afterwards. Now, in the future, in Horizon Europe, the idea is to simplify the landscape of all partnerships, but the basic principles will remain. Certainly, this fundamental principle of a public-private partnership will remain because it is crucial. Leverage is very important, and a program like a framework program would not be effective without this leverage. So this is a list of the contractual PPPs on the right, the ones I just outlined, and what we call in our jargon institutionalized PPPs, the ones that are implemented through a separate agency, although the general idea is exactly the same in both cases. In our case, some of the funding, some of the budget of NMBP goes to the bio-based industries, although that is not visible in the work program. And then, as I said, half of the funding that you do see in the work program goes to the four, principally the first three ones. And the rest goes to other topics, principally nanotechnology and materials. Although even those are developed through a dialogue with industry. They are not public-private partnerships, but the overall philosophy is similar. So the landscape will be simplified in the future. We're talking about only three different types of partnership. One is so-called co-programmed, which is a softer type. That will be similar to the contractual public-private partnerships. The other is co-funded, whereby different partners agree to pool money, to pool the funding. And finally, you have the type that are, if you like, formal and implemented under Articles 185 and 287 of the treaties, whereby there is some organization, some institution, which has to be set up by Council and Parliament to pursue the partnerships. So these three ways, but and in the future, you may have seen that the proposal of the Commission for Horizon Europe has now reached the Council and the Parliament, and a lot of the discussion, the debate in there is about the future of partnerships and missions, how they will work, how they will be governed, who calls the shots, what are the expected impacts, which ones will continue, which ones have been less effective. So there is now a debate about all these issues in the context of the Horizon Europe proposal. I mentioned leveraging already and how important it is. So there are different types of leverage that we are looking for in addition to the leveraging of private investment that I already talked about. We also try to leverage public investment through synergies with regions, for example, and then there are also some public partnerships, like a very important one on metrology, which has been very successful and effective. Then although that is not in our direct power, we have worked a lot with the European Investment Bank to understand the landscape, if you like, of financing, and to help operators like the European Investment Bank understand investment in key enabling technologies better. And we've done a number of studies on that. You will find also that the European Fund for Strategic Investments, the so-called Juncker plan, is already mobilizing a lot of money, and a lot of that actually goes into innovation, well beyond the funding of Horizon 2020. And also we help prepare the ground for the so-called important projects of common European interest, like things similar to Airbus, just to give you a rough idea. So we are looking at, with industry and member states, we're looking at the possibilities of developing large projects like that. So all these are ways in which the effectiveness of Horizon Europe can be enhanced, and if you participate in projects, then you have both an opportunity and a responsibility to engage with all these things and help shape them, or wherever appropriate. Now, this is some data about participation, and we are particularly interested not only in the so-called new member states, the EU 13, but also in newcomers. And newcomers are not only those from the new member states, but also the type of organizations, SMEs mainly, who may benefit from the framework program, but who have not come to us for funding. So we are doing all we can to attract such people, in other words, to go beyond the usual constituencies. One way, for example, is to stress the importance of social sciences and humanities in many of our topics. But that is by no means the only way. So we do all we can to attract those newcomers. A lot of them, of course, can come from the new member states, but not only. Now, in NMBP in general, you may know that already. A very large part of the participation is from industry. It's now more than 50%. And that bottom graph, that is of less interest to the UK, because the UK does extremely well in framework programs, but it shows the absolute participation in terms of funding versus the normalized participation. The participation normalized with the national R&D spending. And there you see, although there are some outliers, you see that there is some correlation, fairly strong correlation, between the national R&D investment and the participation in Horizon Europe. So the more a country invests nationally, the more participation it sees in Horizon Europe. Now, we can have a philosophical discussion about what is a cause and what the effect. Maybe both are effects of something more fundamental, but in any case, it is an interesting thing to observe. The UK, of course, is a very strong participant, as you probably know already, not only in NMBP, but across the framework program. So I come now, I would like to say a few more words about the expected impact. I already said that this is very important and must be taken seriously. And the impact comes in many shapes. So first of all, there is the obvious impact. So when you see a topic, you often see some numerical targets, like reduce the carbon dioxide emissions by 40%. Let's say, you will find that in some SPIRE topics. So there are some direct impacts that we expect in certain topics. Then another impact, a more subtle type of impact, but just as important, is about the take-up of the results. Because, as I said earlier, the work program and the framework program as a whole would not be effective without this take-up. It would just be funding. But if funding is to be effective, then you rely on the take-up of results. In the case, of course, of funding for excellent science, the impact is, if you like, more obvious because it creates a very strong academic and research communities, so that doesn't have to be justified. When you make other investments in particular topics, you make them because you think they are very important topics and that there is room for further investment that will enhance their impact. So when we fund something, typically with each topic that we put in the work program, we fund 3 or 4 projects. These days, a few more perhaps, because topics, there is more budget per topic, but something like between 3 and 5 projects. Now, we don't expect 3 and 5 projects to change the world in themselves, but we expect them to have a knock-on effect. That is when we are successful. And another type of impact that we pursue increasingly is to create a networking effect and go beyond that in creating new infrastructures and services. So we expect that the participants who have developed, for example, pilot lines with funding from Horizon 2020 will then be able to offer related services to SMEs after the end of the project. And that is the idea behind the test beds. As I said, another sort of impact is to reach out to newcomers, because of course a newcomer may bring some more impact, something may bring ideas that have not already been pursued. And finally, we look for user involvement. So we don't merely pay for the technologies to be developed. We want consortia to engage with users in one way or another in order to make sure that the technologies will be taken up. So all those things are looked at in a typical evaluation. So we have tried to be as specific as possible in each topic. So in each topic you will find a number of, if you like, quantitative impacts. Those are easy enough to understand. Then there are some more subtle and equally important ones. And you will find that most topics in NMBP call for a so-called business case and exploitation strategy. So that by asking for that, we ask proposers to think about what is going to happen after the end of the project and come up with something that would look credible to an evaluator. Of course, it may or may not happen. We are not asking proposers to predict their commercial future and certainly not divulge their marketing plans. But we ask about how they see the future of the technologies that we help them develop. And if they have thought about that, then chances are that impact will be enhanced in the future. Now, this is not a new slide. We showed it last year because last year was that is when we developed the 2018 topics. We had the benefit of the interim evaluation of Horizon 2020, the first 3 years or so of the funding. So the lessons learned included very strong indications that it was relevant to industry, not only because of the strong industrial participation, but also because of what industry was telling us about their plans to commercialize the results of the research. Many SME newcomers, although we want to increase that further. There were industry-relevant demonstrators in many projects, and most projects intend to take results to the markets. And we see lots of interesting developments, for example, related to artificial intelligence, the so-called fourth industrial revolution. So even though in cases where we have not explicitly asked for these things, you see them emerging in the projects. So when we developed the current work program, starting with the 2018 topics, and of course the 2019 topics that are open now, we decided to increase impact, partly by having fewer topics, somewhat fewer topics with more budget per topic to tackle the oversubscription. We extended the pilot lines and demonstrators to the so-called test beds, where the idea is to create a facility that can work in the medium and long term to help SMEs innovate, experiment with new technologies and innovate. We have a number of topics with a 50% funding rate rather than the more usual 70 and 100% funding rates to increase the industrial leverage, to make sure that the industry that comes to us for funding is serious about taking the results further, and the results are interesting. In many topics, many of the topics that had 50% funding, this worked very well. In in one or two other topics, maybe we found that the topic was not suitable for 50% funding. That was only in one or two cases. Certainly more weight on the digital aspects, the fourth industrial revolution, as some people call it. And the update in 2020 will be a bridge to Horizon Europe. Now, I don't have a slide on the 2020. I will just say a few words about it at the end. If you look at the current work program, which has the 2019 topics and repeats the 2018 topics that are already closed, you will see that it has a list of topic titles for 2020 that are the same as the ones we first published last year. So we haven't touched those, even though internally there is, we are now thinking actively about how they will evolve, and I will say a few words about that at the end. Now, the structure of the 2018-2020 work program addresses three main priorities. One is foundations for tomorrow's industry, which is about the test beds, creating an ecosystem for upscaling and testing. So that includes the test beds and characterization, modeling. Another one is about transforming European industry through, for example, factories of the future. And the third part is about sustainability. It's about low carbon, it's about the circular economy, and, but of course all these three priorities are closely linked to each other. So although it is a somewhat artificial division, but we wanted through the structure to stress our main priorities. So you will find the topics that are primarily about industrial sustainability, SPIRE and energy efficient buildings in the third call. You will find factories of the future in the second call and the test beds in the first call. Increasingly, digitization is becoming important, and open data, and I would encourage those of you who are interested to read the very extensive policy of the European Commission on digitization. And increasingly, that policy is applied in topics. The open innovation test beds, I've already explained what they are about. Overall, in 3 years, we expect to invest more than $250 million in open innovation test beds for the reasons I already explained. They are in some ways analogous to the digital innovation hubs, but for various reasons they are not called innovation hubs, they are called test beds. But the philosophy is in many ways similar. So they are facilities that on the one hand develop pilot lines and demonstrators, and on the other hand offer access to SMEs as well as know-how. They offer it to SMEs that are interested in experimenting with new technologies and take them further to commercialization. So we expect to fund at least 20 test beds in 6 different areas, and other test beds focusing on characterization and modeling, without which, of course, it is impossible to develop materials. And as you probably know already, there is already a very well-established body of work on nanosafety, which is also important both to ensure that nanotechnology is safe, but also to enable innovation in nanotechnology and to help adopters. In the future, we expect that to continue, of course. And if you look at the proposal for Horizon Europe, you will see that there is there is a lot of emphasis on this aspect of the research and innovation. And I'm sorry, it still says FP9. It means, of course, Horizon Europe. I didn't see that. So this is a timeline of the test beds. So in 2019, in fact, we have only one topic for test beds. But in 2020, we expect 3 more topics plus 1 on modeling to continue building the ecosystem. But in 2019, we will have a topic for test beds in surfaces and membranes. Then we serve 2 focus areas, as they are called. Now you might think that these things are commission gimmicks, but they address a number of hugely important problems. So in the work program, of the NMBP work program, it serves 3 of the 4 focus areas. The first one of those is the low carbon one, which has a total investment of more than 3 billion. And in our case, we contribute topics that are about minimizing the greenhouse gas emissions of industry. which is of course a very important contributor. And in the same way, we help make industry more competitive. Incidentally, a lot of people who don't know about these things say that you become less competitive when you become more environmentally friendly. And I hope you know that this is a lie. And that the two, in fact, go hand in hand. The other focus area that we serve is a circular economy, not only minimizing waste, but using raw materials in the most effective way. The NMBP program makes a huge contribution to that focus area. And there's a total investment of about 1 billion in that focus area over 3 years. Of course, they overlap. And again, there is a somewhat artificial distinction. The good news is that many technologies serve both causes. But for the purposes of presentation, we have assigned some topics to one focus area and other topics to another. But the good news is that many topics, a lot of work serves both goals very well. And the third one, for which I haven't got a slide, is the digitization and transformation of industry. So these are the budgets in 2018 and 2019. So out of these figures, roughly half has already been spent in 2018 or allocated, and the other half will be allocated in the 2019. Now, on top of the 3 calls in 2019, we have a call on next generation batteries. That was simply to show how important developments in batteries are. And it's a call in a separate part of the work program, which brings together all topics from different parts of the work program, energy, transport, and NMBP, that serve developments in batteries. So if you look at the NMBP part, you will not see those topics apart from a reference to them. But there is a different part of the work program that includes all those topics. One topic that was already appeared in 2018, and another topic that is new in 2019. So there are 2 topics that come from NMBP. The deadlines start next January for the 2-stage topics. Next February for the single-stage topics, mainly the public-private partnerships, and the unified call on batteries is in April. So these are the a long list of all the topics, and here I have listed not only the NMBP topics for 2019, but also a number of topics that come from other parts of the work program, ICT, energy, and environment, that are directly related to the priorities that I have already talked about, and which we have developed in close cooperation with our colleagues who work on those priorities, those other parts of the work program. In future, of course, there will be much more of that. And the ones I've included for completeness, the 2018 topics that are closed, simply to show how things progress and how we topics sort of cooperate with one another, if you like. But the ones that appear in grey are the ones that are closed. And the 2019 ones are in white background. Now, you will not see the 2020 topics. If you look at the work program, there is, as I said, a list of the 2020 topics. We're now working on the strategy for 2020. And because I'm sure I will be asked, and anticipate one of the questions, we expect them to evolve, not drastically, but we do expect them to evolve partly to reflect developing priorities. For example, we are thinking about a reaction, about a response to the need to look after infrastructures like bridges. There might be something on that for obvious reasons. But most of the topics you have seen as titles will probably be developed as topics. and a few other topics may be introduced. So that is all I can say about 2020. That is that we try to respond to emerging needs and to somehow anticipate what will happen in Horizon Europe, to bridge to Horizon Europe in a number of ways. For example, by increasing digitization or by enhancing further the societal aspects of topics. That's what we are working on now. I think I will close at this point, and I think we still have time for questions. If you have particular questions about topics, I may be able to answer some, and failing that, I will put you in contact with my colleagues who know more about specific topics than I do.
Thank you, Nicholas. So we have about 20 minutes for questions. So if there are some questions for specific core topics, I'm sure we can take some. Now, just to remind you, this session is being webcast. So if we can avoid leaving and coming in, perhaps. So are there any questions from the audience for Nicholas at the moment? Yep. I'll run over to you.
Thank you, Nicholas, for the presentation. We understand and respect that there are lots of demonstration trials going, and they help us understand the key enabling technologies. And the funding is there. I think the mismatch, as you said, about public-private partnerships is, in UK specifically, I think BEIS came out with the numbers that there are 440 projects with social housing, out of which 220 haven't crossed the feasibility studies. But when we have from our Horizon 2020 and other innovative projects, what are the technologies which are suited for particular regions? How can we tie these up together? Because manufacturers like us are happy to do it. Obviously, other SMEs are happy to put in efforts, and funding is there. Can we support local government in towards the clean growth strategy?
Right. So if I've understood the question right, is how do you make further progress by federating? That, of course, is one of the big questions for us also. When you remember, I showed a slide on leverage where, and I mentioned in passing the regional funds. They're bigger in some regions and some countries than in others. So in the case of buildings in particular, we would expect a lot of funding to come from there to take technologies further. In fact, some of us might say that there is not that much need for R&D in that area, because there are a lot of technologies that are already mature in that area, and that now you need more public and private investment rather than horizon investment. So am I answering the question? It's not easy. We cannot make that happen. That is a short answer, because it's not entirely in our power to make all these things happen. Beyond the direct funding for projects, all we can do, if I might put it crudely, is talk and come up with studies, encouragement. We work on federating people through workshops and studies. I have a colleague in my unit whose job it is to do precisely that, to work with regions and see and educate them, if you like, about opportunities like the ones you mentioned.
Oh, thank you.
That's about it.
Good morning. I'm James Dutson from Plasma Quest, which is a small to medium-sized enterprise. And the thing that caught my attention was that in one of the slides you said the learning from the original Horizon 2020 was one of the things is for open data. As a small company, it's very difficult for us to put a wide gamut of patents out there, so know-how becomes very important to us. Could you expand upon what open data means for SME, what would be expected to put out there in the open, and what we can keep to ourselves?
Okay, well, that's, of course, a very good question. The standard answer is that there is no conflict between open data and competitiveness, or IPR, because, of course, you can always patent anything and everything you want. Open data is about sharing the results of the research, and after all, patents are about open data, aren't they? They just protect your IPR. But in effect, you share the knowledge. So what the underlying principle is that if research is publicly funded, then people have the right to benefit from the results. That doesn't mean that the companies that participate in the research and development don't have the right to exploit the results. Of course they do. So of course you will patent anything and everything that you develop, but that is not contradictory to the open data. So there is a lot of guidance. I must admit I'm not a world authority on how it works in practice. The long and the short of it is that projects have open data by default. They can opt out. They have to come up with a data management plan. But the important thing is that it is in no way does it stop you from patenting your work.
As I said, my concern is that as an SME, we can't afford to keep that range of patents for anything and everything. We have to be very selective. And know-how becomes very specifically important to us, and we can retain the know-how without having the patents. And that's where I would have concerns about that aspect of the work.
I see. So you are saying that in some cases you prefer not to patent, but to keep it to yourself. Because, yes. Right, that's a separate question. Yes, I don't have an answer to that. I will have to think about that, but it's an interesting question.
Can I maybe help on here? Because it depends if your know-how is from manufacturing, because the manufacturing know-how very rarely ends up in the open data, because this is really the scientific data that goes in, that is being shared, the results. So very often the know-how is the manufacturing side of things. That doesn't necessarily need to go into your open data. So that is for you to judge. But in our experience, you actually publish the research information results, which is what you were saying. Yeah. The know-how, like when you do a paper, does not necessarily need to be written down. It necessarily needs to be.
That is certainly part of the answer. Yes, that you don't publish absolutely everything and anything. That is why you have a data management plan.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? I would also like to remind people on webcast, you can type in questions and we will try and raise them.
Good morning. You were saying that that at one point you said that it's SME friendly, but on the other hand, you're also saying you're trialling a 50% funding. I'm wondering just how, having experienced, been part of FOF previously, just how you're evolving the process to make it more SME friendly, to help with that, if you like, the differences between consortia partners in the different funding requirements and stages and all the rest of it. Whether there's been an evolution, because certainly the experience as an SME within the FOF previously is that it is quite hard. It is quite difficult for SMEs to engage in those processes.
Yes, fair enough. Now, first of all, the 50% funding is the exception rather than the rule. You see it in, if I remember right, 2 or 3 topics a year. I cannot remember offhand how many of these we have in 2019. Again, 2 or 3, I think. So it is very much the exception than the rule, rather than the rule, and we use it only in topics that go to high technology readiness levels. And the reason for that thinking behind it is it actually was one of the key recommendations from our advisory group. And they said, if you want to, on the one hand, you get more leverage, obviously, by having 50%. And on the other hand, you can check how serious the participants are in taking the research further. Because if they're not serious about it, they will not come for 50% funding. They will go somewhere else. So it is a kind of filter, if you like. That said, it is very much the exception than the rule. The normal rule is to have 70% funding in innovation actions, those that go closer to applications, and 100% funding in the research and innovation actions. And our approach is that roughly half of our topics are research and innovation actions with 100% funding, Again, very roughly half are innovation actions with 70% funding, and very few of the innovation actions have 50% funding. And the idea there is that the SMEs that participate at that point of development have other sources of funding and are serious enough about the research to participate. That is the answer. You may not like it, of course, I understand that. Of course, it's not easy for an SME to participate. We try to make it easy in other ways. But maybe 100% funding is not always the panacea. Yes, you start with 100% funding up to a certain technology readiness level, but then it does make sense to for the public funding to diminish as you approach applications.
Okay, thank you. Did we have another question at the back? Was there another question at the back? No? Do we have a question at the front? And are there any questions potentially for Liz? Any burning questions? Well, I have got a question, and actually I will ask Craig. So Craig Sharp is our NCP in NMBP as well. Now, we are participants in European projects ourselves. How does the whole kind of guarantee work out? If things go really bad, we're hopeful they don't go bad, I should say that, and we're optimistic. But what is the process? Is there a specific process I need to engage with to make sure that we're secure? I should have asked the question once I stood next to you, but...
Yes, thank you for the question. I was trying to save that one to the session immediately after lunch. I'll be along with a couple of slides then to add a little bit more detail. The government published updated guidelines round about this area back in August. Some of the slides early afternoon will be up there along with a link. You'll get copies of those. To give a short answer to what is inevitably a rather tricky question. Right, funding, it kind of splits two ways. If a deal is agreed, then the joint report to which the UK signed up tail end of last year comes into effect. UK continues to apply, well, pay into the pot that pays for Horizon 2020. Everything stays at normal all the way through to the end of Horizon 2020. No changes, no problems. If in the unlikely event of a no deal, then the Treasury guarantee kicks in. And at that point, at the moment, there is a portal set up on a website. I can set up details later, which you register your basic details to be kept in touch with what's going on. The Treasury has made a statement to say that your funding will be guaranteed. There's no problem with that at all. That is absolutely guaranteed. The bit that changes is that your status counting as a member state may vary slightly. Again, I'll talk about that in the afternoon. But the funding continues for the life of the project regardless. 2019 calls you're looking at just now, you apply into those, you're evaluated as normal. If you're successful subsequently, regardless of whether there's a deal or no deal, your funding will be guaranteed. Not a problem. The recent extension, that also applies all the way through to the end of Horizon 2020. So again, unlikely event of no deal, your funding again will be guaranteed if you are successful. It's collaborative R&D, regardless of whether you're a member state or potentially in a no deal situation, a third country effectively, you're still fully eligible. A lot of countries outside of Europe apply.
Thank you, Greg. So the point to note, there's a portal.
Hi, Amy Peace from Brightest. And just to follow on to that, we've had the guarantee about the funding for this. And as a coordinator of Horizon 2020 projects, we just got a bit of a concern about the legal framework for that. So if there's, say, disputes over funding and things, and it's a no-deal scenario, who do we default to for actually having the legal oversight of those grant agreements? Because if we're in a no-deal, then we've fallen out of those legal agreements.
Give you some time to think about this one. Let's transport the microphone.
Right. If you want the precise detail, I'm going to struggle to give you every single aspect. What I can say is that if you're looking at countries who are not member states or associated countries coordinating. There's a lot of precedents to do with that as well. We know our friends in Switzerland did that for 2 years quite successfully, including in my own area. I've actually sat at programme committees and seen Swiss coordinated projects when they were outside, when they were treated as a third country, coordinating, all passed through. So the legal precedent exists to do it. If you want me to give you the precise mechanism, I'll need to have a little chat with BEIS as to exactly what's happening. There's a lot of work going on in the last 2 years in contingency. Obviously, we don't really want to activate it unless we really, really have to. But the guarantees are there, the mechanisms are there. The minister stood up and said there isn't a problem with you being a coordinator, your funding will continue, the mechanism will be there and will be sorted out.
Spurned another question. Craig, you can stay here, and actually, Craig, just stay here. Come back.
So yeah, I'm not sure. So Patrick Hull from Malvern Panalytical. I'm not really sure which of the two of you this is for, but I guess along those notes. So the UK government has guaranteed the funding. Is this something that is jointly developed with the EU as well? As in, are the EU happy to continue to fund the projects that they have? So, for example, if we were in a project with, say, Germany, our funding is guaranteed because we're UK from the UK government in a no-deal situation. I assume the EU are still happy to fund the other part of the project.
I think maybe that's a question for Nicholas, actually. So it's about the European contribution to the project if the UK guarantees puts the cash in.
Yes, so if you are a coordinator, and what happens to the different parts of the funding? Yes, well, the Commission works on the assumption that that in Horizon 2020 at least it is business as usual, one way or another. I mean, I can read you my script on that. I don't like reading from notes, but there I can tell you exactly what the line is. But essentially, it is that it is agreed, although it is not the agreement is not signed, but the agreed part, if you like, is that funding will continue and that Horizon 2020 will unfold as usual. That is the official line.
Thank you.
But this is not a formal agreement yet. It is the agreed part of what has been discussed.
We've got another question.
Rich Walker, Shadow Robot Company. I don't want to go around on the no deal thing, but if anybody wants to talk to me about it later, please do. What I would like to talk about is you mentioned about the clarification of the landscape around the PPPs. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about what the Commission's expecting to do and put in place?
About the
clarification of the PPPs, the numbers of them, the way they function, the joint undertakings.
Right. Okay. All we have done so far is to simplify the landscape in the proposal. So one of the criticisms, relatively few criticisms of Horizon 2020 is that the landscape was too complex with many different types of partnership, for example. So what in the proposal for Horizon Europe, you will see that there are only 3 types of partnership, and it doesn't say whether they are public, or private, because they can fall into these categories. And as I mentioned in passing, one is the softest version is co-programming, where you sit with the stakeholders and you agree to fund the same things, or you agree to fund the things they're interested in. And that is what happens in the contractual public-private partnerships. So you have an obvious hook there to continue doing pretty much the same, assuming, of course, that the partnership in question is justified. That's a key thing. The second type are the co-funded ones. So an example of a co-funded partnership are the present ERANETs, where we pool EU budget and national budget, and then in order to fund the so-called transnational calls organized by respective funding agencies that participate. So, and ERANETs are examples of those co-funded partnerships. And the third type is, if you like, the heavier type, which relies on particular articles in the treaties and needs some sort of institution to be set up in order to run it, just like the current joint undertakings. So there is, the long and the short of it is that all partnerships that you know about already can continue, provided, of course, that they are justified, that they fulfill the principles. And certainly there is a lot of interest in that. Because on the one hand, the member states, the parliament, and so on, appreciate the importance of partnerships, but they always ask, what is the effect of how effective is that partnership and how effective is this partnership? So they want to be satisfied about that, and that the current debate is a lot of the current debate about the proposal of the Commission is about missions and partnerships. How will they be chosen? Will the Commission choose them? Will it choose them only through a co-decision process with the Council and Parliament? So these scenarios are being looked at. But the long and the short of it is that it is possible to continue all those partnerships in principle.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we're now at the coffee break, really. If you have got any more questions, then please feel free to talk to the individuals over the coffee break as well. And if you could convene again for 5:30 sharp, so the webcast then resumes. Thank you. So welcome back after the slightly longer coffee break. My apologies to the audience on the webcast. We actually had a little bit of a problem creep up with one of our speakers later on. We've resolved the issue, but there will be a slight change in personnel featuring on stage. However, first we are going to resume now with our panel debate or panel discussion, and we are going to hear from different organizations on their reflections on European funding success, perhaps also on some of the challenges. And I would like to invite my 4 panelists to the stage, please. So Amy Peace from Brightest, please. Then we have got Sylvain Bush from Johnson Matthey. We have got James Johnston from CPI, and Imtiaz Ansari, from Kingston University, last but not least. So, to begin with, I'm not going to really talk about who you are. I'll leave that to yourselves. So, to begin with, I would like to invite each of you to briefly reflect on your experience in European funding, also introduce your organization a little bit, and if we start with ladies first. Amy, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, check the microphone's working. So, yes, my name's Amy Peace. I'm from an organisation called Brightest, and we're actually a not-for-profit SME, so representing the SMEs here, based up in Warrington. But we work globally with the process sector industries, mainly chemicals and pharmaceuticals in our background. But as I'll get on to, Europe's really helped us get into other sectors. So what we do is, it's all about translating knowledge into understanding, which might not mean a lot, but we were a spin-out from a research project 18 years ago, and it was all about sort of the systems thinking of how do you get your chemists talking to your engineers, talking to your manufacturing, analytics, modelling people, all the way through to sort of business, talking the same language, understanding the same problems, whether that be for optimising an existing process, looking for new routes to a chemical or new options for technology. It can be for tech transfers, scale up. Are we putting the right numbers into a very complicated quantitative model? All that sort of end of things. And recently, we've got a lot more into sort of that decision-making side of things, into sort of techno-economic decision-making, factoring in sustainability. So we first got involved in European projects back in FP6 and then through into FP7. Some of the really big projects with many partners looking at some really big issue topics, things like flexible modular plant design. We looked at a lot of the methodological side to that, through to batch to continuous processing, new catalysis. Now with Horizon 2020, we've been involved in some slightly different types of projects. So within the Spire PPP, I've coordinated 2 coordination and support action projects. So the first one of these was one of the first projects to be funded. So I had all the administrative guinea pig challenges involved in that. And that was the project Style, which was looking at pragmatic approaches to sustainability evaluation. So how can industry embed sustainability into their decision making on a day-to-day basis before you've got all the data to do quantitative detailed evaluations. And then my current project is called Spring, also under the Spire remit, and this is about how do you enhance the impact of projects. Because as we've established, Spire have funded a lot of projects to date, I think over 77, and they're doing lots of technologies about resource, energy, emissions, efficiency. But what are the barriers to stop those technologies actually getting into industry? Because if they don't get into industry, then the Commission is not going to reach their targets on all these energy and carbon savings that we want. So really trying to get to the root of some of those problems, not a small challenge. So you asked us to say a bit about why we get involved in European projects, and one of the things for an SME, funding. You know, we get a lot more funding support for a European project than we do a UK project. So someone was saying earlier, you know, when you've got a financial burden about being involved in something, it certainly helps if you get more return. But there's a critical mass, I mean, particularly when we're dealing with topics like standardisation, sustainability. If you want to work with the experts in that, they're not all based in the UK. Different organisations have those bases in different places, and usually there's a Europe centre for them, but there's not always usually a UK base for that. And if you want to get standards out, it's much easier to start at Europe than start at the UK and try and push those standards further out. Networking, key. As I say, we've started in chemicals, but we've now been able to work in things like steel, cement. We're about to start a new project in plastics. We're in a call on CCS, all different areas we've not been able to work in the past. And just that general networking. You know, we've made some great contacts through working in European projects, and actually then having influence back to the Commission. As an SME, it's really encouraging that the new calls are not just all based on what big industry want. You know we have the ear of people at the Commission asking us for our opinion on certain calls. We've seen calls that have got lines of text in that we've contributed. And it's very rewarding to see that they're actually taking kind of advice back from projects we've worked on.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I'll actually pick up on the influencing bit later on again. But Sylvain, yeah.
Hello, I'm Sylvain Bush. I'm here representing Johnson Matthey. So hopefully most of you will know who we are. We're a FTSE 100 company. So the other hand of the scale, about 20,000 people, 30 countries, with about 40% of our business being in Europe. We've been founded in 1817, so we are 200 years alive, and we've celebrated last year our 200 years. So you might know us primarily for our main product, which is platinum base, which is the catalytic converters, which is also the cancer drugs, the cisplatin type drugs, which is again will be all developed here in the UK. We deal a lot with all the precious metals itself that you find in both the medical industry, but also in the jewellery. But these days, Johnson Matthey has really tried to move away from just being precious metals, and this is really the areas that I tend to represent, because we're looking at a new markets, and we've been investing a lot in batteries. It's about 200 million invested in batteries in the past year alone. And I represent fuel cells, which is again, the other end of the spectrum, still based on precious metals, but still looking at sustainability. And a lot of the things that we do in catalysis is still very much based on providing sustainable products. So this is really who we are. Our experience in EU funded. So I had a quick look yesterday at all the projects because we've been involved in hundreds of projects, so I'm not going to list them. But the first project we were ever involved in was an FP1 project. So that tells you a little bit the length of time that we've been involved in. So we've had a lot of experience in dealing with EU funding. I myself have been involved since FP6 and FP7. Initially as a work package leader, I am coming from the technical end. I'm a chemical engineer from my background, but an electrochemist from my PhD. So initially I came into this game as someone running work package. And in the past 5 years, I've really been far more involved in actually constructing projects and managing them within our organization to make sure we deliver both what we contractually obliged to do and we've signed up for with the EU, but also what is important for the industry is what internally we also want out of this project. We just don't want to run them in isolation. They need to be part of our own strategy in terms of where our engineering strategy needs to be. And we were talking earlier, the key to EU funding is we can take risks. Because the funding is 70% or 100%, we can take far more risk with the technologies that we want to use because of the funding that we are receiving, and that's really key to us. So we're involved in NMBP, SPIRE, LCE, low carbon, green vehicles. We've got Marie Curie, so we're involved really across the board. Currently, we've got about 30 plus projects and 6 that are waiting. That have been approved and are going through the usual grant agreement and contract agreement. So I myself, from the fuel cell side, I'm currently running about 8 projects, and I'm coordinating 2 of them. One as full coordinator, which is called INSPIRE, and one as technical coordinator, which we were talking about, which when in view of the coordination issue might be an interesting experience to talk about. And that one has the best name ever. It's called Mamma Mia. So there you go. So it's all about additive manufacturing. So we really like the name. And we like our names. We've got names like Grasshopper and Spire. So we do like our names. What we do with EU funding, yes, the funding is good because we get the money in. But the key part for us is the links that we do, because we have links with our suppliers, with our customers. A lot of the OEMs, the automotive OEMs, they are in the EU, and we've got to work with them. So that enables us to work with them both on the battery side, for example, on the fuel cell side, well ahead of their powertrain development, so that our products can then be exploited directly within those powertrains. That's very important. And the other part as well is supply chain. For all this new technology, without the supply chain being in place, you will not have those technology going through. And you need to work with them to make sure the supply chain is in place. And again, this is what really the EU funding is giving us, is, yes, the funding, but the partnership are as important. And the final part of it is, and we were talking about earlier, capabilities. There are a lot of capabilities with some of the institutes in Europe that are not available in the UK. Particularly a lot of Fraunhofer Institute have amazing capabilities. If we wouldn't have EU funding, we would have to go and pay those institutes to do work for us, to enable us to do some of the pilot plant work that we need to do. That is the reality. All right?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, moving over to James on facilities. Yes.
Hello, I'm James Johnston. I'm a senior bid manager for the Centre for Process Innovation. The Centre for Process Innovation is part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. You're probably aware of what function it operates. And CPI is based predominantly in the northeast of England. And we have actually 2 for the price of 1. So actually Anne is here today as well. So raise your hand, Anne. Thank you. So EU funding is pretty critical to CPI, to be honest. So many of the facilities and projects that we run are absolutely funded by the EU. I've been involved with European Union since 2006. So I was the contact point for NMBP Framework 6. And I've kind of witnessed quite a change and evolution in the programme. So, you know, we fully applaud the development of the more digital manufacturing side to the programmes. And we've benefited tremendously from, I suppose, the investment in capital. So I'm from the printed electronics division, which is all about producing hybrid organic electronics. So we get involved in many, many different projects. So it touches OLEDs, OPVs, the development of smart wearables, things like that. So we have a pretty formidable capability up in the northeast, and we also have developed capabilities in materials and formulations, part of the formulation centre, and we also we have a graphene application centre, so we're also heavily involved with that. In terms of the types of support that we give, we kind of have several modes. So we've been involved in I would call kind of straight vanilla European Union projects, but more and more we've been involved with pilot lines and also some of the open innovation test beds, hopefully. So this is a kind of a nice departure. So for people who kind of want rapid response to getting involved in Europe, things like our Smarties project, SMEs are able to collaborate, and we can operate a mechanism which is called cascade funding. So we kind of take the glacial procedures of the Commission so that you can apply and get things done quickly. I mean, we must admit, I was thinking about today, and yes, the timescales are enormous. I think I was talking to someone in the audience here, and between the work programme being published and about a year to year and a half for the projects to be contracted, and then it may be 3 to 4 years to be executed, you definitely have to have a long-term commitment in this. So it's not for the uninitiated, and it's definitely a team game, and we often choose partners which is the best solution for the project, not necessarily our friends.
But you're friendly, obviously.
And we're friendly, of course. So half the battle is trying to solve the riddle of the topics. Sorry, I've just remembered. We also get involved in incubating companies, especially in principal electronics, and we've made a lot of use of things like the SME instrument, especially SME instrument phase 2. We've been beneficiaries through subcontracts, and also things like fast track to innovation. So it's often what we call a client journey, where we're trying to find the best solution for companies and trying to fit that around a myriad of complex topics and mechanisms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And trying to redeem myself with the bad name pronunciation. Intimi. I can't do it.
It's all right.
Intimias.
Yes. Hi, I'm Imtiaz Ansari from Kingston University. So, yes, I have been also involved with, since last, quite a few frameworks. And being the university, the Kingston University has been involved in the EU funding from the beginning, because that is our part and parcel of the role. That's what we do, that we carry out the research, cutting-edge research, and our teaching is based on those research. So research-informed teaching, that's what we carry out. And it's a good incentive for our researchers. It is good incentive for our researchers that they can see the benefit, not only that research is being employed in the industry and is benefiting the wider community, it has a wider impact, but also the learners, they're learning, the education they're giving is out of their own research. So the students get to see the first-hand and experience how it can be employed in the industry and the benefit from it. So that's what we do. So research is quite big for us, Kingston University. Our 1/3 of the income, research income, comes from the EU. So it's very critical. We do all sort of make applications throughout the wide spectrum of the work program, whether it is Erasmus, Marie Curie, ERC, and of course NMBP as usual. One example I'm going to give you just to make Mamma Mia happy is we have a project called Monica, who can go Mamma Mia, and it is a very large-scale demonstrator of IoT pilot involving 9 countries, 28 partners, and over 4 years it has 15 million funding. And it is really very encouraging to see such a wide and huge impact is having already. The project is about basically the variable network. So you can use those variables in the large events like, say, festivals, music festivals, or in the cricket or rugby matches. And you can manage the crowd, see the security, and in case of any incidents, they can be properly informed. So I think that's a very, very good pilot, being piloted in 6 different cities across the EU. At any one time, 10,000 simultaneous end users can be managed and taking part in one of the applications. So it is a very huge impact-wise. Likewise, we also part of one of the project actually coordinating, and that is the ethic of ICT, because okay, ICT, we have the whole cover in the program. So everybody's doing the research. So what is the ethical consequence we have of doing the research, collecting all the data? What is going to happen to that? So Commission, put this call, and we are sort of making the policy towards this coordination support action. So I think it's a huge impact. Impact we are giving to the whole Commission actually. That whatever research we do, it has to be ethical. And so we are giving back to the Commission in that sense. So funding-wise, I think it's very important. I totally agree that we had to find the right partners rather than the friends. Of course, they have to be friendly to deliver. Otherwise, they are not good. But so far, we have very, very good positive stories to take, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now, if you have got any burning questions, you can pop up your hands. If not immediately, then I will start off with some more questions from my side. I guess we are in an interesting year this year for European funding. And I'd like to just go straight to the chase. So with regards to the uncertainty around Brexit, I mean, you're still here, you're still engaged in European projects, presumably you're still pursuing more funding opportunities. Have you found that things have changed? Can you sort of empathise with suddenly UK partners no longer being popular, or what is your experience and what are you doing now to remedy or mitigate? And whoever is quickest to the microphone, if we divide maybe the microphone between sort of Amy and Sylvain, and then...
I'll go first. We were talking about this at the break. So I'd say that the Spire program's been quite good in this respect because it is very much feels like a community of organisations, whether you be Spire members or just have been involved in projects. And so through virtue of the networks that we've built through that, we're still getting approaches from organisations to be part of projects, which we see has been encouraging. I think it sort of helps if you're offering something which is quite niche and is sort of not duplicated. We have sort of seen there's probably more difficulties where there's not much in choosing between partners and maybe there's not a history or people don't know kind of the people involved. And I've said we had the same experience when trying to choose partners for the STYLE project at the time when Switzerland was going through difficulties. We could choose between a Dutch partner or a Swiss partner. Both looked very similar, but we didn't know what complications there would be with the Swiss. And that was the final straw that meant we went with the Dutch partner. So I suspect there are cases like that where it's maybe not the big thing. People say we're not going to deal with UK, but if there are a few potential partners in running, I think it could be a big swing for some people not choosing a UK partner. Okay. And we'd probably, at this stage with the uncertainties, not go in as a coordinator in any new projects, but we may look at taking on sort of technical coordination roles. So somebody else has to deal with the admin.
Yeah, perhaps to clarify, I mean, as a coordinator, you receive all the funding, the finance from the European Commission. And so I guess rather than getting muddled up in potential different sources dealing with that, that's, I believe, the underlying idea. It's not necessarily that you should deter from being a coordinator, but there's certain precautions you might want to take. Sylvain.
Yeah, no, I agree that the coordination is what we were talking about at break is, I mean, again, Craig may say something different this afternoon, but from the white paper what we could gather is that, yes, the funding will be supported by the UK government, but it cannot, at the moment, has no means of redistributing that funding to other partners within the EU. That's what was written in the August white paper. And that's what worries us, which is why we're going more towards a technical coordination more than anything else. The other thing that we have encountered is if a consortium of a project becomes too UK-centric, if you got 2 or 3 partners, then you will have people saying, well, no, this is something that we've got to address, is they'll try to find other people, so that having too many partners from the UK is not seen as something that will be nice to have. So that's something else that.
So that's the perception in the partners you're working with. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah. Just to counter that, we're currently involved in a proposal that is UK only, and certainly past the first stage. So at the evaluation stage, that's, you know, the formalities, there's no indication that there's discrimination, but obviously it's a people dynamic. And I think everybody should try to reassure their other partners as well that, you know, it will be safe. I'm sure it will be fine. Are there any more comments, James or MTS?
Yeah, I would reflect that we're probably in the same boat here. So I guess we're trying to be passively proactive, which is a bit of a weird way of working. So, I mean, we actively get involved with consortia building and putting bids together. But, of course, we have this, we're slightly in an awkward position where we don't really want to coordinate. So we have to use all our skills to try and encourage our partners to take on that role. And it does work. You can do it if the person taking the coordination role feels you're right behind them. I think that's where we've benefited the most. I think some of the other instruments might suffer. So probably SME instrument might be a bit of a blow. So I don't know how that's going to pan out. But from our perspective, we'll keep continuing to bid until we're not allowed. So we like to keep Craig on his toes.
Yes. Yeah. He's on his toes at the moment and for other reasons, but yes. MTS.
Yeah, so we have some slightly different experience about duty Brexit. One of our academic, who is Italian, by the way, was told by the Italian organization that they're reluctant to join us in a consortium. They had the reservation, and then of course we had a conversation which gone on for a while, but then at the end the Italian organization backed off and we went ahead with the submission. So, but since there was no written evidence, we could not give forward to anybody else. So yeah, otherwise in general, most of our organizations who work with, they're quite positive, and like business as usual we are doing.
Okay, thank you. I think it really depends on the different areas as well that you are involved in.
Yeah. I'm just going to sort of add to this kind of the reason why we're still sort of being there, and this is kind of more those sort of technical details, but, you know, as I've said, is we've been able to influence some of these future calls. You know, these are part of a strategic sort of path that we've got of kind of how we want to develop our tools, how we want to take forward our thinking, and, you know, having that reward, seeing those wordings come up in future calls, we're not just going to go, not going to bother now, it's too difficult, you know. This is the best path we've seen for taking a lot of these ideas forward. So, yeah, we're not ready to give up yet.
So, actually, on that point, I know that you're very active in SPIRE, one of the PPPs that was mentioned earlier. I know, Sylvain, you're involved with the fuel cells and hydrogen joint undertaking as well. Those are kind of vehicles that are a little bit special, I guess, sort of membership clubs or whatever you might want to call them, or as they might be perceived. So with SPIRE and the FCH-JU, perhaps, you can reflect on the opportunities you have through your involvement in those. I know, Amy, you're very active there. Sylvain, I'm not sure on the influencing side how you get involved.
We're part of Hydrogen Europe as well.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with SPIRE, I'm on one of the working groups looking at horizontal actions. So that is bringing in a lot of the things that are relevant across different types of technical projects. And this is meant to be one of the mechanisms for getting new calls written. Now, I think what the interesting thing is there is this sort of very formal procedure of how new SPIRE calls come about. You know, they come from these working groups, different industry and academia sit on them, and then they go through to the commission and various sort of groups sort of interact with them, and then they come back into the proposals. I think it's not been as transparent as we might have thought at the start of SPIRE. We thought it would be literally working groups come up with calls and then you see them materialise a few months later. But you still feel like you're being involved, and there have been occasions where they have come back from the Commission in the first draft, and that's not what we said. And the Commission have been open to sort of changing them slightly, but also just making you aware of the different stakeholders who may have influenced it. And, you can sort of come round to why things have ended up how they have done. And, you know, sometimes calls can read very strangely, some very strange wording in titles, and then you look in the text and it maybe doesn't necessarily reflect what's in the title, and I now understand how that happens. So I would say, yeah, kind of if you see a call where the title doesn't mean much, make sure you read the text, because it may be completely different to the title, but the title might have just come about because of politics.
Okay. Yeah.
Influencing is very important, but there are two ways of influencing. There is at the topic itself. So I only know the FCH in this case, but the FCH in February asked us all to actually submit a form, submit for topics. There's hundreds of topics that are being submitted, and then they put them into different sections, try to put them in different sections, and they come up in June with about 40 different topics that are being looked at with respect to what the work plan is, and then decide, right, these are the ones that are going to be funded this year. And then you can then apply to be part of the group working on that topic. So you can have an influence there. And I agree with Amy, there are times when different people influencing end up being quite peculiar. But there's another part of influencing which is higher level, where there are, for example, for us, there is Hydrogen Europe, which ensures that in any work program, hydrogen is still well represented. So there's even a higher level there to ensure the funding is kept at a good level. But also, hydrogen is represented with respect to what the sustainable plan needs to be for Europe. So there are two different levels of influencing that are important, and if you can get involved, and it takes time, but it means at the back end, you're more likely to get what you want.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? I've just taken over with my questions. No? Well, we have got 2 more minutes left. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to ignore you. You have to bear with me.
Hello, this is just in response to some of the comments made about how the PPPs are a community and a sort of club. So if we're currently outside that club and we're interested in one of the calls, how would we best get involved in the process of introducing ourselves to people currently involved and promoting ourselves?
Yeah, I think the thing which was a surprise with the Spire PPP is that the majority of projects that have actually been funded aren't necessarily all in the club. They are just, you've got the same chance of applying to a Spire call as anybody who's actually a Spire member. They may have just had a bit of a head start on seeing drafts of those calls earlier, and they may have had a bit of head start on sort of knowing some of the other people who are interested in those sorts of topics. Now, there are many brokerage events that are sort of run by Spire themselves. I'd say if I would get to one of the brokerage events for one of those things specifically. There are electronic means where you can put kind of what your organisation does, so people can sort of find your partner finding. I don't know of anyone who's had success through that. That's the only thing. I've seen these things and think, there's obviously a place for people to put their interest, but I think you've got much more chance if you turn up in person. It's probably a good chance to plug the KTN. Is it KTN Innovate? They're doing grants for SMEs to go to international brokerage events. So I'd thoroughly recommend that. I mean, yes, it costs more to go to one in Brussels, but if you're more likely to get a project on the back of it, then go for it. But just have a look as well, who's been in projects on similar topics in the past, because you can always look in those. And they're most likely to be the people who are interested in being in future projects on those calls. So get to their workshops, contact them directly, and sort of raise in their sort of thoughts that you exist. Because they will be looking for different partners, because if it is just the same people working together, that will be looked on less favourably.
Happens all the time. Mamma Mia, to come back with the most fabulous name. We actually have 2 Italian partners that have never been part of the FCH, simply because of what they could offer technically. So if you want to be, if you're interested, if you think your technology has an interest for battery or for fuel cell, contact people directly and say, look, this is what we're interested in. And also the project review days that all topics tend to do means that they're presenting their work, the people are there. It's a great opportunity to actually put the context. But if you've got something interesting technically, why not?
I should add here, so if you go to the European Participant Portal, you can now search for organizations and then contact them through that as well. So you don't necessarily need to send an email to info@johnsonmatthey and then never hear back from them. You can actually contact organizations. We had one more question, and then I think we need to wrap up.
I'd like to get a clarification how we might be able to, as a small company, collaborate with CPI. And my company is interested in superconducting composite materials. And we have a composite material in mind, and we would be interested in manufacturing. Yeah. Can we actually work with you on that?
I would say take up the chat during lunch, perhaps, and directly talk. I don't know, James, if you wanted to quickly say something, or that's different.
Well, yeah, we get involved in all sorts of materials. It will boil down to the manufacturing process in the end, and whether it looks as though CPI can assist with its facilities. Although we get interesting challenges which stimulate facility build. So, you know, we have lots of. I know the area of materials has mushroomed in terms of novel materials, different structuring of materials and processes to do that, really take you at the cutting edge. So that's something we'll have a look at. Can't promise anything, but we'll have a look at it.
Okay.
How do you approach you to CPI?
You talk over lunch, I think. So yes. So I think with this, we bring the panel session to an end now. Thank you very much for your reflections and your comments. Thank you. So next, I don't want to eat too much into the lunch break. We're running about 10 minutes behind. So next, if you clear the stage, and then I will bring Craig up onto stage. So our next item on the agenda is an evaluator's perspective. Unfortunately, Rebecca got stuck in traffic. She basically can't be here physically. So the new Rebecca will be Craig Sharp, giving the presentation to the best of his ability and having a quick word. Yeah, okay. So, over to you, Craig.
Okay.
We're trying to do it in 20 minutes.
Okay. Unfortunately for you, I'm the thing standing between you and lunch, so I will try and go through this fairly quickly. If you've got questions, I'll try and answer them as much as I can, and I'll be about over lunch and later on today as well.
Craig, sorry to interrupt, but are we going to get these slides onto the internet?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Some of you may have seen this kind of thing before. If not, it's a quick overview of the evaluation process. Effectively, as I usually say at these things, when you write your proposal, make sure you're writing it for the evaluator. If you spend months of your time, in some cases, you can get very, very close to these things, and sometimes you have to stand back, internally review. You're pitching to typically between 3 and 5 evaluators, for whom English may not be their first language, and this might be one of 10 proposals they're doing. Evaluators don't normally do this as a full-time job. It's a job they do in addition to what they're doing in the evenings, at weekends, or whatever. So just bear these kind of things in mind. Okay, deadline. You've been working away hard. You get your proposal in before the deadline. It goes out to a number of individual evaluators contracted by the Commission. They will feed back their thoughts, how they like it, don't like it, some quick feedback initially, and then there's a consensus. The slides that I go on to shortly will go into this in a little bit more detail. It's quite an involved process. It's evolved over the years. It's very, very tightly controlled, and there's a lot of safe checks and safeguards in it as well, for obvious reasons. Okay, so some of the guiding principles for the evaluators. You can actually find some slides on the Commission site, which will show you the actual guidelines as well. I'll show one of those this afternoon that relates particularly to the UK. Anyway, you don't represent a particular employer or your country. There's quite a high proportion of evaluators from the UK there. I see no particular bias in favour of the UK from that point of view over the years. So I do believe people are genuinely doing it on the basis of the quality of the proposal. Anybody here evaluate? Would you like to speak about this? No, okay. Yeah, okay, right. Okay. Impartiality, objectivity, fine. And the accuracy, it's okay as well. You evaluate the proposal as submitted. It's not like FP7 where you put in an idea and the Commission said, yeah, we like most of it, but change that part or change this a bit about and do these extra work packages. It doesn't happen. You submit it, that's what they evaluate it on. If you don't tell them enough about what you're doing, they're not going to second guess. Commission does basic checks and eligibility. The evaluators assume this has already been done. Their job is to look through the proposal. They assume it's passed a basic quality test. Okay, touched on the no grant negotiation phase. Getting worse. Right, time to grant, 8 months maximum, measured from the deadline. The Commission has up to 5 months before it tells you the results, yes, no, or maybe you're on a reserve list. Once it's done that, then there's typically about 3 months or so at the end. Anyway, they've got 8 months in total. There's a bit of flexibility in the timings. There was a hiccup way back in the first year where if they told you less than 5 months, they only had 3 months to contract, so didn't tell you till 5 months. They've now relaxed that, so they might tell you, they'll probably tell you about 2 to 3 months from a deadline, yes, no, and then the balance of the time is contracting, basically. Evaluate as submitted. Minor fiddles maybe. There might be some questions on budget. Might be some questions just to check exactly what a partner is doing, where they're adding value. It's that kind of stuff. It's certainly not major. If there's a problem with it, you get marked down accordingly. That's just the nature of these things. Okay, minimum 3, sometimes 5, depends on the type of proposal. There's normally a short period between the deadline when you submit things that the Commission is using to confirm evaluators, make sure they're actually available, do a quick check and then get it out to them. In advance of the deadline, it normally keeps an idea on the number of registrations, possible proposals building up in particular areas, so it can start contacting evaluators in advance to set things up in particular technical areas. Evaluation at that stage is normally remote, so you've got the evaluators doing it during the day, evening, weekend, whenever. They get put in and then there's usually a consensus group, a panel in Brussels. Reports of this vary. It's a bit of a closed system for understandable reasons, but I get the impression it can reach a stage where you're kind of taken into a room and sometimes you don't get back out until you've reached a sensible conclusion. Somebody's not shaking their head there. Okay. Right. This sort of stuff is in the work programmes and associated documents. Some of you may know it. I can take you through some of the details or where to look. You're marked in excellence, impact and implementation. Excellence, basically, are you in scope? What's the science and research that you're proposing? Impact, obviously, how's it going to be exploited? And what we're talking about today, NMBP, impact is key, the ability to exploit. The previous 7-year programme did a lot of TRL 1 to 4. This one concentrates in the 4 to 7 area for obvious reasons. So you need the industry pool. You need to be able to show that it's going to have an impact and people in your consortium can take you there. Implementation, that's a bit more about the project management and also to some extent who's in your consortia. If you're in a project for 2, 3, 4 years, you're probably not going to finish up with exactly the same people or in some cases companies all the way through. It's also about how you manage the fact that over that time you may have differing views on what you're going to do with the project or who's delivered what when. How you manage all these things. You're marked out of 5 for each of those, so 5 for that, 5 for that, 5 for that, maximum 15. That's a generic area. It applies in some. NMBPs actually 4 out of 5 for excellence, 4 out of 5 for impact. And you need to hit a minimum of 12, actually, not 10, when it comes to the total. That's your minimum quality. In practice, funding sometimes starts at 12 out of 15 if it's not too competitive. Quite often it's nearer the 13 mark. So you can understand the kind of marks you need to hit in each area. You're marked out of 0.5 when things get amalgamated. I'll come on to that in a little while. But as touched on earlier on, the difference between getting funded and not getting funded can be very, very fine sometimes. So pick what you're doing carefully and revisit it and evaluate it as you go through. 5 minutes left, or ish? Okay, right, I'll skip through a few of these. Right, evaluation criteria. As said before, you'll get copies of these slides. There's a few more to run through, so I may skip one or two of them. This is just to give you a very quick overview on how excellence, impact and implementation are evaluated to some extent. This is relatively top level stuff. How they actually do it, it is independent. They don't get any special briefing particularly. You deal with the text that you have. Bear in mind the text is put together by a number of committees and people from different backgrounds and languages. So there's always fun interpreting it for everybody. It's exactly what is meant. So spend a little bit of time before you dive into a topic to make sure it does indeed fit with the idea you want to go in for. That's basically saying if it's a wonderful idea but it doesn't fit the scope, then you're going to get marked low. Sorry. You have to fit within the scope as described. That's it. No negotiation on that point. Quick wording on how you're going to be marked. In practice, you've got to be down about this kind of level, pretty much across all the areas to get yourself funded. If you're new to it, it's a gradual process, you learn. Consensus, this is when the evaluators have done the remote, start coming together. You need to find, as I say, consensus. 3 to 5 people, all technical experts. Surprise, surprise, you probably won't get exactly the same answer or same opinions about things. That's why you've got to bring people together. The rapporteur to draft it, including the comments, which will actually get fed back to you. Some of you may have seen a number of those in the past. They are normally carefully constructed. It's moderated by commissioner agency staff, depending on what area, so it's carefully balanced. It's a discussion to try and work out if there's any outliers, if there's any particular problem, or arrive at a common mark that you're willing to give a proposal. And the Commission also has observers. We, as national contact points, see the minutes of these things and we see it's been signed off. So panel review. So the experts have brought in, ensures comments are consistent, there's nothing wrong. No one's written an inappropriate comment back saying you didn't include this when actually the proposal did, and things like that. Quite a common area, this. As I say, you're marked in half marks, so you'll find a lot of people scoring 12, that's your minimum, 12 and a half, quite possibly you're going to get funded there, 13. If you're on the 12, sometimes 12 and a half mark, some people are going to get funded, some aren't. So you're into tiebreakers. That's the generic thing in the guidance. Actually, it's the other way around for NMBP. Impact is the key. It's the first thing they're going to look at, the ability to exploit. Then after that, you're going to start looking at excellence. Then after that, there's the other aspects as well. There's also a fiddle factor in there about how many proposals there are in a particular topic. You can read into it. It sounds a little complex until you actually do a kind of worked example and then you understand why they've done it. Basically answer as many of the questions as you can. Really make sure you hit the scope. If you've got SMEs in there, make sure they are actually clearly identified as SMEs. I know it sounds a trivial thing, but in some of the early calls there was a problem in, long story short, last 7-year programme, if you're an SME, you got a higher grant rate, therefore there was an incentive to tick the box, say you're an SME and prove it. Nowadays, it doesn't make any difference. It does make a difference, however, if you're back onto the tiebreaker aspect. having an SME in there that's declared can sometimes make a difference between you getting funded and not. So if you are one, please declare it. Demonstrate you understand the projects and initiatives. Nicholas talked earlier on about some of the roadmaps and background. Please don't assume we know you are. It's not personal, but everybody has to be evaluated in a suitably independent and level way. Please don't assume anything at this point. Make it easy for an evaluator to understand your idea very quickly up front in the first 1 or 2 pages. Catch the idea, think, that's nice, I'm interested, yes, it fits. Where do I find the references throughout the document to find it, and make it easy for them. It could be the 8th or 10th one they've looked through in the last few days. A number of us spend our time helping people with proposals. In early drafts particularly, it's quite common to get to about page 40 out of 70 odd and think, oh, that's what you're up to, that's nice. But a little bit earlier, please. Okay, so objectives, just keep them clear, the proverbial SMART, make them realistic. That's an interesting one. We talked earlier on about being able to show that you understand the state of the art, you understand the problems. Make sure you refer to that and show you understand all of this. I mean, the project's going to have problems, it's going to have challenges. That's what your project management and your risk management methodology are all about, to prove you understand what you're doing. Basics, does it still make sense? You're going to believe it. Fundamentally, convince the evaluator, yes, this works, it's interesting, there are some risks, so they understand what they're doing, they've got the right people to take it to the market. Okay, and the usual, make sure it aligns to the call, very quickly quoting back some aspects of the scope if you need to say, yes, we'll do this, 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 and this, here's the references, and so on and so forth. Okay, quick bit on impact. What are the key areas, of course? How are you actually going to deliver it? How long is it going to take after the project? Who's going to do it? What's the commitment to these people once you stop getting the money? It's always an interesting one. It's very nice to say it, but do we genuinely believe you'll do something with it after the project? Why? Where's the business plan? Who's going to do it? What's the backup plan? Okay. Little bit in dissemination, of course, the routes. Conferences and publications are fine, particularly from the RTO and particularly the academic side. That's good, but the bit that will really sell it, because you're normally dealing with higher TRLs, is how you get to the market. Snippets of a business plan throughout it, some figures. Market projections tie into things like this. Implementation, okay, that's depending on the size of the consortium. How are you not going to fall out with each other? In other words, how do you make sure the project stays on track and everybody delivers what they said when they would, or thereabouts? Be very clear who's doing what and what work package and how it all hands over to each other, so it's not a surprise. The risks I've touched on earlier on, summer management. In fact, in my experience in CRD, a lot of it is to do with how you get on with people rather than the technology itself in practice. I suspect that's something to do with, in the past, there were things about you had to involve certain countries. And yes, there is a drive towards improving the success rate in countries that have not been quite so successful. That's all well and good. But the primary driver is you have in your consortium who you need to actually hit the targets and deliver an impact. That's it. And strangely enough, I will skip the Welsh bit, but thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you over lunch.
Okay, thank you, Craig. I think in the interest of lunch and also in the interest of your sanity, we'll reserve the questions for a chat directly, and I think Anne put up her hand as well as somebody who's evaluated before. So if you do have some questions, then please grab the people during the break. Now, after lunch, during lunch, we're going to convert the setup here, and we're going to break into 2 different rooms. And on your badge, you will have a little 2 lines at the bottom telling you which session to go to after lunch. We have got a general info and brokerage session, which will be in the back, part, and then we have got the consortia building session, which will be in this part. So after lunch, we'll usher you into the right place, and then we'll take it from there. So lunch will be finished at 1:30, please. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll start. Thank you very much. So good afternoon. My name is AJ Kapadia. I am the Knowledge Transfer Manager for Composites within the Knowledge Transfer Network. So my colleagues are Suzanne and Claire. So it gives me great pleasure today to be chairing this parallel session 1, General Info and Brokerage. So first, could I ask Craig Sharp, National Contact Point at Innovate UK, to talk to us about UK participation in Horizon 2020. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, because it's like being live streamed.
Yep. Okay. Okay, hang on. Right, unaccustomed as I am to speaking here today already. Welcome to the first session immediately after lunch. As trailed a little bit earlier, this might contain some bits to do with Brexit and some of the safety net, and I do want to keep emphasising a lot of it will be about the safety net. I understand the reasons why you'll focus on it, and it's a perfectly reasonable area to look at, and you're going to have to answer questions from potential consortia members or people who want to invite you in, but it is a safety net. Okay. First up, this is one that came out from the Commission. I don't think Nicholas wrote it personally, but came out in 2016, shortly after the referendum. This was part of the publicly available briefing notes that go to the evaluators. Anne's not here at the moment. Okay, right, so she wasn't there. Basically, treat the UK same as you would do normally. No change, no special treatment, no bias against, please. And we all looked at that and thought, well, that's nice and reassuring. Let's see how the results actually pan out in practice. What I'll do is quick headline stuff on the 2016 call. That was the last pre-referendum one, 2017, which is that working? Can't see it from there. Okay. Anyway, it's comparing the first call after the referendum and the last one before it, just to see if our position, success rates, whatever, slipped, changed, got better, whatever. This is for a combination of the standard nanomaterials calls and all the factory of the future, energy efficient building and process industry ones, so it's composite. What happened was, pre-referendum we're sitting about 4th in terms of funding, post-referendum we're still sitting about 4th in terms of funding in this area. Actually, I should say it's actually, no, that's the wrong way around, right. Okay, in terms of participant numbers rather, it stayed roughly the same grading. In terms of funding, beg your pardon, it dropped very slightly. A lot of that is to do with the fact that we were maybe about 20% down on UK numbers in. When we dug into that a bit more, we found there were some national calls that closed within 2 weeks of some of the deadlines, and strangely enough, we found people in there in practice. So when we took a look at whether people were still being picked up by non-UK led consortia, the approximate number we'd expect to find in there were still very much there. So you can think of, there's a certain amount of absorption that non-UK coordinators are going to take of the UK, and that was kind of full up. And the UK coordinators dropped in numbers and didn't necessarily have quite so many roles to find. So the roles were a little bit smaller. 2018, we're still awaiting the final results. We do have the ones for the single stage calls, which are the Factory of Future, Energy Efficient Building, Inspire. I haven't put them up there because it's only half the story and it might be distorting, but if I compare them to how the comparable calls went in 2017, our success rates overall are a little bit better than they were last year. So again, that backs up the fact that the evaluators don't appear to be, well, it sounds horrible. I can find no evidence the evaluators are doing anything unpleasant to us, okay? So the briefing that comes from the Commission, you know, evaluate people as you would before, all seems to be the case. Rather long-winded way of saying it, but that's what it comes out as. Nope, okay, right, try it this way. Yeah, right. Some of the actual figures in the red circle at the top. The average success rate, this is a composite of taking stage 2 of 2-stage and the results of the single stage. There's various reasons why I had to do that, but that's just for consistency of data. 2016, your average success rate that way was about 21.7. The UK hit 21.2, so about average. This is pre-referendum, 2017 below it. Average success rate 23.5, UK success 27.4. So again, the advice on the evaluators, treat us normal, all the rest of it, fine. There isn't a problem there. Big change, if you look over to the far right of it, at the top, the UK represented just under 10% of all those who applied. It's just participants and coordinators together. Most are obviously participants and non-UK led. Post-referendum, our overall numbers then dropped, and we knew that. But the success rate is higher, and people are still applying and still being taken up by other consortia. The big difference we tend to find from talking to people, I don't know if your own experiences sit it, is maybe in the past you'd be more inclined to get phone calls from people. Now you're having to be a bit more proactive, as in actually start bugging people to be part of the consortia. Harder work, I appreciate, but what we're seeing at a bit more of a macro level is it's almost as if people are being involved in less proposals, but their overall success rate is going up as well to some extent. Because you're there because you really add an awful lot of value in, and the proposals tend to be stronger and far more focused. It's probably not as simple as that. But right, the next few slides are the Brexit stuff. The bit in bold at the top, I have to keep emphasising this, the priority is the draft withdrawal agreement. That's the joint report that was drawn up at the tail end of last year. Within that, there is a section that commits the UK to paying into the multi-annual financial framework. Out of that, Horizon 2020 is paid for. So in other words, if a deal is done, Horizon 2020 continues as normal until its end. You continue as a member state, fully eligible, paid through the normal routes. No change. Then we go on to the bottom, the contingency stuff. This is on the unlikely scenario of a no deal. Government keeps stressing this, so it's your backstop, it's your safety net, effectively, which has been worked on for the last couple of years, and we're at the point in the timeline now, we have to start activating elements of it and make sure you fully understand. So it is a safety net. Right. So, originally in August 2016, the government gave a Treasury guarantee that basically said, as long as you apply before the point of exit, which of course is near the end of March next year, then if you're subsequently successful, you will be funded. That stays. No change to that. The deadlines in this call are January and February next year anyway. So if you're in a 2-stage, it's the stage 1 that counts with regards to that timeline. So you'd always have been okay. If a deal is done, none of this needs to apply because you're paid as normal through Horizon 2020. This is only the no-deal scenario. Okay. July this year, government announced it would extend the guarantee. So rather than being a case of as long as you applied before the point of exit, it now applies all the way through to the end of Horizon 2020. What they're doing in this case is giving you the insurance effectively that in the event of a no deal, after March this year, you would become a third country. Still allowed to collaborate, still allowed to take part. The Swiss did it quite happily for a few years while they were outside, but they had to self-fund. So it's really the same kind of idea here. So you can continue to keep applying for this. You will be eligible, you will get funded. If you are a third country, however, you do not count as a member state. So remember, there's the basic rule of you need at least 3 member states or associated countries. In other words, if you go into a proposal, it's probably a reasonable safeguard to make sure there's at least 4 countries in there, including yourselves. The vast majority of collaborative R&D has at least 4 countries in it. The number of countries, the number of projects out there that has only 3 countries, and one of them the UK in this area, is tiny. So if you're going into anything, just make sure there's 4. And that's your ultimate safeguard. In the unlikely event of a no deal, you're still part of a consortium, you're still paid for, there's still going to be a minimum of at least 3 countries. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, this is a bit about what you get access to. This is a statement from the latest government update. The links will be on the slides, which you'll get. Some of you will have seen them anyway. Basically, in the event of a no deal, you would be eligible as a third country. So the same as, say, South Korea, US potentially. Switzerland, again, I keep citing as being the classic case. It was treated as a third country for 2 years of calls. It was still involved an awful lot. Quite a lot of people actually quite liked it, ironically enough, because as a third country you don't count towards the budget. So if a call says 4 to 6 million, and that's 4 to 6 million between the other member states, you come along again as an extra, your own country pays for you and you're free. Odd, but true. And again, back to the bold. NMBP calls are collaborative and eligible for third country participation. You are allowed to apply into these. If you're doing mono-beneficiary stuff, and I know this affects academics quite a lot, they potentially might not be eligible. But all the calls in the NMBP area are collaborative R&D, and you are perfectly eligible, should we become, in the unlikely event, a third country. Okay. Kind of assurance you can give. Again, this is quoted from the document itself. It's just really re-elaborating it again. It's a statement late in Parliament. We know there were concerns when the initial guarantees were talked about. Are this really going to stick? Are they going to backtrack or not? They're not. It's been said again and again and again. It's in print. It's a statement made in Parliament. It will hold. And again, the government's priority is ensuring the draft withdrawal agreement itself is the key priority. So all this stuff I'm putting up is, back to what I'm saying before, is your safety net, just in case. There have been questions about the coordination area, quite understandably. This was a statement made by the Minister recently. There were some reports on the BBC site saying in this scenario we can't coordinate. Well, I know from my own experience, from what I've seen, that's not true. Third countries can coordinate. It doesn't necessarily happen in a huge number of cases. Again, I've seen a few Swiss ones do it during their time as well. There is track record for it. Right, that bit. Looking to what the next 7-year programme could be potentially. Some of Nicholas's slides referred to it as FP9. It's now called Horizon Europe. There's some interesting discussions going on about exactly what it's going to do, how much money it's going to have, and particularly where all the money is going within it, between all the different areas. It's normal at this particular point. The UK produced a paper a few months ago on its thoughts about it. And it stated a number of times it's interested in potentially associating to it. So there's a number of discussions going on that behind the scenes, basically looking at the programme, seeing how it fits with what we might want to do, being blunt about it, how much it might cost and what we're going to get back out of it. Understandably, there's a lot of thinking going on around that area, but it is something we're interested in. As it says, the programme itself would run 7 years, in contrast with Horizon, which was, what, about 75 billion, if I remember correctly. Horizon Europe has gone up to, depending on where you look, around about the 95, 97 billion mark. 2 minutes. Yep, okay, just about done. That's the current high-level structure.
broadly. See if I can get anything. Doing anything? No. Right. Okay. Right. Pillar 2, cluster called Digital and Industry. That's broadly ICT and NMBP, but there will be opportunities elsewhere because there'll be an awful lot more in the way of cross-working going on. If we remember correctly, the nominal, and it is just nominal because it may change, combined budget for digital and industry will sit around about the 15 billion mark, we think, at the moment. That's over the 7-year mark. So there's some interesting areas in there. And a quick summary, the success rates themselves are still looking quite good. We appreciate there are challenges in getting involved and putting your ideas together, but we still seem to be welcome in consortia. As ever with these things, pick carefully and make sure what you want to do fits with what the call area is and it's going to add value to your own business. Partnering, we're seeing UK partners, particularly the ones who go out to the brokerage events and typically parts of continental Europe. Still being picked up, lots of interesting conversations brought into projects. Coordinating still possible. I take the point this morning it's more difficult and you're worrying about some of the safeguards. So there's 2 ways to approach it. One, it's still doable, the guarantee's still there and it can be done, or you can be the sort of technical coordinator and help pull a lot of it together as well in the background. And also take a look at some of the other call areas. Ellen will be up shortly to talk about some of the things she's getting to do. Stafford will also be about, I hope. Hey, sorry, looking the wrong way there, to talk about the joys of ICT. Project officer stuff, there was a launch event in Brussels last year. Short form link there, project officers stood up, 3 slides, all the topics. So if you're interested in particular ones, it's useful to have a quick look. That might help you focus in on what they think they're wanting. That's it.
Okay, so there's a sort of networking break at 3 o'clock where the speakers will be able to take questions. Thank you very much, Craig. Can I next call Claire Klassen from the KTN, who's going to talk about collaboration support landscape. Thank you.
Thanks, AJ. Hello, everybody. I'm Claire Klassen from KTN. Just a brief 5 minutes. I think most people know who KTN are. As a reminder, our mission is about driving economic growth. We work with companies, UK companies, to help them solve their innovation challenges. We help connect solution providers with those that need the solutions, and we help technology companies find the markets, which may potentially be able to make use of their new technologies. We do that in a variety of ways. We bring together businesses, entrepreneurs, academics and funders together to help develop new products, processes and services through a variety of means. That could be through getting information via our newsletters, via our website. It could be through events like today. It could be through participating in one of our special interest groups. Or it could be via one-to-one interaction and support through one of our knowledge transfer managers. So just to give a bit of a flavour of KTN in numbers, these are figures from last year. So we had 140 staff, and around about 110 of those, roughly, as a proportion, are sector specialists. We cover 11 different industry sectors, and we have 5 different cross-cutting programmes. One of those cross-cutting programmes is called Projects and European Programmes, and that is the team that I head up, and that's the reason that we are here today working with the national contact points and the EEN to bring you this event. Besides the industry sectors and the programmes, we run special interest groups. They are a rolling programme of areas where we believe there is a need to accelerate the economic impact from those areas. And within those at the moment, we've got, for example, additive manufacturing, we've got materials for composites, we've got artificial intelligence and robotics. So 3 of the examples of the 10 that are running just now. We ran over 310 events last year. They're not all related to European funding. A lot of them are related to UK funding. or they're about bringing people together across sectors that wouldn't normally meet to help get synergies, bringing together different technologies and across the supply chain. And we are interested in introducing people developing new collaborations with the ultimate aim of delivering those new products which will in the end grow the UK economy. So what support do we provide for Horizon 2020? Our primary objective is working together with the national contact points and the EEN to optimise the support to you to help you access the opportunities which are there from Horizon 2020. We can do this by building on links that we have with the European technology platforms. So they are networking organisations at the European level, and particularly in relation to the event today, we have a place on the board of EUMAT. We are the secretariat for SUSCHEM. So we've got close links in particular with those two European technology platforms. We also participate strongly in the bio-based industries joint undertaking and the SPIRE PPP. So we're able to refer into those networks. We do participate in projects where they support our purpose and strategy. So where there is a role to disseminate or to participate in exploitation plans to help deliver benefit to UK companies, and particularly where there is an opportunity for developing those collaborations across sector or along value chains. So if there is an industry association that can do the job, then KTN are not the right organisation. Our USP is where there is a need to bring together cross-sector connections. So in terms of finding partners, just to say a little bit more about how we can help there, there's a variety of routes you can use that, and you will need to use a number. There is no one right answer, and I completely agree with some of the comments which Amy made earlier on in the panel session about networking and getting yourself out there being the most important thing that you can do. So you've got your own network, of course. You will use that in the first instance. You can expand upon that by using the networks which are available through the national contact points. Some of the national contact points have online portals where you can post profiles. Enterprise Europe Network, they have a database full of profiles where you can say what you've got to offer to a consortium, or you can seek expressions of interests from other organisations for your projects. Suzanne mentioned the participant portals, so you are able to flag there against the call topic that you're interested in. You can register yourself as being of interest, and you can also search the related projects from previous calls and contact the organisations that were involved in those, so that's another route. And then there are various online brokerage tools, for example, that are provided through BBI. They provide one, SPIRE provides one, SUSCHEM provides one. So part of our role is to help understand what you need and help let you know about the options, about what's there. As far as KTN's own network is concerned, we have a very extensive network of companies in the UK. So if you're looking to collaborate with UK partners within the consortium, and remember that doesn't need to be limited to one or two. When you look at Germany, for example, they could have half a consortium is built from German partners, and then the other half is pulled from other countries. So you don't need to think that you're the UK partner and that means there's no space for other UK organisations. So KTN, very extensive network of UK companies. Also the contacts to our special interest group. So if you're pulling together a proposal in one of the areas where we run a special interest group, then we will have a very detailed list of organisations in the UK which are working in that space. We participate in European projects, so if there happen to be an overlap between the call topic that you're applying to and the projects that we're in, then we're happy to help link you to project partners. And then, as I've already mentioned, European technology platforms. So this slide I've put up just to show you how quickly your network can grow. So we're in 9 Horizon 2020 projects. That is 124 organisations that we are connected through to as project partners across 25 countries. So, as I say, just to give a flavour of how quickly your network can grow through participating in European projects. And then slightly different example, and the person who I worked with to do this is sitting in the audience. This was Promethean Particles. And we profiled Promethean Particles at a SUSCHEM European Technology Platform brokerage event. And they were successful in going into 2 proposals as a result of that, which were then successful with 800k investment into that company. Now, that makes it sound very easy when I say it like that. Please, can you do it for me too? Now, the reason I think that was successful was Promethean particles had a very clear added value for that topic. It was very, very obvious why that topic was a good topic for them. They weren't on the periphery of it. It was a very clear fit for the expertise they had to offer and the added value they had for that proposal. We were lucky. We profiled them at the right time in the right place. So the experienced coordinators, we feel they sit in the audience of these events. They sometimes, but not often, get up and present, but they're sitting there, they're listening. They're listening for who is a potentially good fit for the proposals they're putting together. So if you get an opportunity to present yourself at one of these events, then that is a good opportunity. As it happened in this case, there was a very experienced coordinator who was sitting in the audience. They recognized the opportunity and they got in touch with Promethean Particles. Now from their side, they put the resources and they committed the resources to respond to that request, to get to know the coordinator and the proposal, and to help shape how their company would fit into that proposal. And that's important as well. You need to be prepared to commit time to developing the proposals and working on the project ideas. And last slide. So what is coming up? You do that and to network. There are a few opportunities. So the Suschem brokerage event is on the 23rd of October in Brussels. And they, as the name suggests, they focus particularly on topics where chemistry is a part of the innovative solution. There is another one focusing on the NMBP programme, same as today, which is on the 30th of October in Vienna, the Industrial Technologies Conference. And if you are interested in attending one of those and you're a UK-based R&D SME, then there is a competition open at the moment to win £500 towards your travel costs. There's only a small number available, but please, through that link, you are able to apply for that support. Then we have a brokerage event which is in the UK in Birmingham. That's on the 20th of November, and that's organised by the Enterprise Europe Network, along with our NCPs. And if you have a technology which is applicable beyond the NMBP topics, then we do have a series of other events coming up, crossing the ICT work programme, the transport work programme space. And so you can find out more information about those at that link. So that's me. If you want to keep in touch regularly, please follow us on Twitter. That's where we promote all of our news. And feel free to talk to me in the break afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you very much for plugging my special interest group. So I look after the materials for composite special interest groups. So afterwards, if you want to have a chat about that, please come and see me. Could I introduce the next pair of speakers? You get two for the price of one again. Ellen Pope and Stafford Lloyd from the National Contact Points at Innovate UK. Thank you.
Thanks. Might be a bit crowded back here. Hi, so the main point we wanted to come up here was, first of all, just to introduce ourselves. So my name's Ellen Pope. I'm the new National Contact Point for Advanced Materials. So obviously most of you will probably know Craig, but we both work within NMBP, and then I'll let Stafford introduce himself in a little while. So I wanted to give a really quick reminder about what we can actually do for you. So obviously the National Contact Points are publicly funded. Most of us sit within Innovate UK, not all of us, but the majority of us. And we span the whole of H2020. So if there's any particular sector that you're interested in, contact any of us and we'll make sure that we put you in touch with the right person. Obviously all member states have national contact points across the Horizon 2020 platform, and that's 60 countries because that includes all the associate countries and things like that as well. So what can we actually do for you? We can help in a variety of different ways. So we can give feedback and general information on some of the work programmes. We've heard from people today that have had specific input into them, but we can help give you clarification on the documentation and what's in scope and that kind of thing. We can give you guidance on the rules and legality side of it, as well as different priorities of the Commission. We can help you if you're not sure if your topic is in scope or not. You can come to us and we can give you a general idea behind that. We can also help with your proposals. If you give us enough time, we're happy to read your proposals and give you any help that we can on that. And we can help in partner searches as well. So we've the KTN talked a little bit about that, but we're also there to help with that side of things and give general feedback once the results come out as well. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of events that I'm personally involved in. So the first is the brokerage event on the 20th of November in Birmingham. This was mentioned by the KTN, but if you have any questions about that, feel free to come and talk to me in the networking bit and I'll happily send you the link and give you more information. The other one isn't directly related to Horizon 2020, but it is an international opportunity. We are working with the EEN to do a global business innovation program trip to South Korea this November. So this is for any SMEs working within the field of advanced materials that have applications in transport. So this is our second trip out to South Korea, and it's basically if you're looking for any international collaboration, feel free to come and chat to me about it and I can give you some more information on that. But I just wanted to briefly introduce that, and if you think that's something you might be interested in, come and have a chat with me. So I'll just pass over to Stafford now and he can introduce himself and talk a little bit about what he does.
Awesome, afternoon, thank you. Yeah, so Stafford Lloyd, I'm the new national contact point covering the information and communication technology and future and emerging technology work programs. So even though, as I'm sure you're all aware, Horizon 2020 is organised into these work programs, as it's been mentioned a couple of times today, there's quite a lot of cross-fertilisation and cross-interest between the different work programs. So really, I'm just going to use this slot as a little plug to let this audience, or make this audience aware of the topics in the work programs I'm responsible for that I feel may be relevant to this audience. I think really the main message I want you to take away from this is basically who I am, and if you're interested in any of this, please contact me. My email address is there. Drop me a line and then we can start having a better discussion. I'd also like to add that I'm relatively new to this role and I don't profess to be an expert in ICT in particular, so please do look at the work programme, and if you see anything that's of interest I might not have mentioned, then do get in touch and we can have a chat about that too. But in very brief format, the things I have pulled out that I think might be of interest to you guys, in terms of the ICT particular focus of the work programme, there's ICT 01 2019, which is titled Computing Technologies and Engineering Methods for Cyber-Physical Systems, particular applications in industrial sectors. There's a focus on there on emerging technologies, including augmented reality and artificial intelligence. There's Unconventional Nanoelectronics, which is ICT 06 2019. There's a focus on new approaches to computing components. So this feels a bit more relevant as NMBP specifically references nano. And there's Security and Resilience for Collaborative Manufacturing Environments, which is linked to the Factories of the Future, PPP, which has been mentioned, with a particular focus on data security in the context of digital collaboration in manufacturing environments. It seems to be a strong data security theme as well, because there's another topic which is called Supporting the Emergence of Data Markets and the Data Economy, in particular industrial applications. There's a focus there on setting up industrial data platforms for secure and controlled sharing of what they call closed data. So the deadline for all those is 28th of March 2019. Then the next kind of area of subtopics, which are titled Digitising and Transforming European Industry and Services, Digital Innovation Hubs and Platforms. So there's a Smart Anything Everywhere, which is linked to the I4MS initiative. I think we've already talked about that with a couple of people today who might be interested. So there's a focus on digital innovation hubs, experiments and tests with one or more of the following technologies: robotics, analytics, simulation and artificial intelligence, additive manufacturing or laser-based manufacturing equipment. Then there's the digital manufacturing platforms for connected smart factories. Focus on there is platforms for connected smart production facilities, targeting use cases in what they call the human factor, human competencies in synergy with technological progress, or sustainable value networks, and that's manufacturing in the circular economy. The deadline for those is the 2nd of April. So just in case you have a broader interest in ICT, as I said, please do look at the work programme. If you're not sure how to find it, drop me an email, I can point you straight to it. But there's lots of other topics, photonics, robotics, 5G, next generation internet, cloud computing, data economy, what they call extreme scale computing, and cybersecurity are the main themes. There are going to be a series of events run in partnership with the KTN, particularly covering photonics, robotics, and next generation internet and cloud computing this autumn. So information on those will be communicated shortly, and please feel free to come along. And if you're really interested in fancier trips to Vienna, there's the main European ICT information and brokerage event, which is happening between the 4th and 6th of December this year. And as Claire mentioned, there's also potential to get your trip funded, as she mentioned as part of the presentation, or at least get some money towards the trip. So that's me. So please feel free to get in touch, and nice to meet you all.
Thank you very much. And before we start the project pitches, can I invite Graham Laws from the Europe Enterprise Network to give us a talk.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. You've heard on a number of occasions today about Enterprise Europe Network, and it's safe to say that we're quite a large organisation, and we're very proud to be part of Innovate UK. And indeed, as has been referenced, there's a strong relationship between all of our partners, not only within Innovate UK, but also globally. Give it a sense of scale, we have 3,000 advisors like me operating in around 60, 61, 62 countries. We're in 600 different locations. And these are very real people doing very real things. We're the largest business support network for innovation in the world, and we're growing. We're growing every year. We bring more countries on board. I guess, we've already reflected on Brexit, and I don't need to talk anymore other than to say the important number there is 60 plus countries worldwide. As far as Enterprise Europe Network's concerned, in the UK, it's situation normal. It will continue for the foreseeable future. We operate in a number of different sectors, and similarly to, as Alan's explained, your role, we have some sector experts that do a deeper dive. And the reason that we do that is, as you can imagine, there are literally tens of thousands of businesses that we're in contact with on a constant basis, and we simply have to be able to cluster them. And if we bring experts in to do a deep dive in some of those areas, then obviously it gives us the opportunity to be able to focus on drawing attention to calls, to events that might be running, to opportunities for collaboration, working with the NCPs and with other partners. Now, the structure for how advisors deliver their services is fairly standardised across those 60 countries, but the organisations that deliver those services can be quite varied. So it can be teams within local enterprise partnerships in the UK. It could be organisations that are chambers of commerce in certain parts of the world. It could be governmental departments. So there's a number of different groupings, if you like, of experts who bring their talent and their connections to that wider circle. And I say to businesses that I meet, and it's very much about business to business, this is we come in and talk to you. It's the one-to-many. I'll talk to you and I'll connect you with as many people, as many organisations as you would want to be connected with. And there are literally thousands and thousands of opportunities that are being created on a daily basis. So breaking it down into chunks, we sit in three key areas. So our international partnerships, one of our strongest points is our database. Has anybody visited EN and seen the database? A few there, that's good. Our database is updated by the minute. So I did a search this morning on nano and advanced materials, and just in the last month there's over 240 new opportunities have been posted there. And that is either by research organisations or SMEs who are looking for bringing their technologies to be integrated into a finished product, bringing their finished product to a new market, they have a market and they're trying to find a piece of technology, or probably most importantly, they've seen a call and they need to find partners. They need to find partners in a geographical location or in a particular sector group. So they use our partnership database to be able to find that, to connect with it. You don't need to sign up to anything to go and visit it. Our URL's at the bottom. You'll find it at the end of our slides. Just search for Enterprise Europe Network. Go and find our database and just try it. It's keyword driven. It's very effective. The model is you find something, you then make contact with us, we make the introduction, and away you jolly well go. It's very effective. We also run our brokerage events, and it's been touched on already today. There's a number of great brokerage events, and I will, in a little while, talk about the one that Ellen's already touched on that we've got coming up. We're very pleased to be able to offer these because this is one of the important parts of what we do, which is ensuring that we connect businesses with businesses, because we're a business connection enabler. That's probably our greatest strength, is getting you connected to another business or research organisation. So today there are 14 other matchmaking brokerage events happening somewhere within our group. On average, it's between 20 and 25 a week that are happening every week, maybe not so many in December. But there's an awful lot of events that are happening. They're all B2B, they're all designed to connect you with another organisation, that to get you talking, get you pitching your ideas, creating those collaborations. And what we do after those events is we come back to you and we say, you had 4 meetings, how did they go? What happened? Were there any challenges? Did you hit a barrier? You know, did you get all the details you needed? Did that spur off a topic that you wanted to explore further? Are there other organisations that were there that you didn't get hold of? Let us do that for you. And that's really what we are. We're the go-to people to actually ensure that those brokerage events, and indeed the company missions as well, are as successful as they possibly could be. Otherwise, what's the point in you taking a day out of a valuable slice of your day to go to one of these events and not follow up on that? So that's the international partnerships. Under our advisory support services, this reflects back in on what I was saying about having that team, those 3,000 advisors in country, in situ, in any location. It's because we have the information on the ground. On a regular basis, our group, I operate from the University of Greenwich, we get regular inquiries from our partners all over the world saying, we have a company, they're in Slovenia, they want to make contact with the NHS in the UK, we have a company that have this product, what are the legislation in the UK for that? And we do vice versa. It's hugely valuable to be able to give the right information at the point of need, and there are so many of us, it doesn't take long for us to be able to deliver it. And the market intelligence is equally important. I was speaking a little earlier to some of you about this idea that you've got a great product, you think you found your market, you go to take it there, and then you realise actually there's some barrier to entry. If only that information could have been found up front. Well, it can be, that's what we do. Everybody, what we say, all of us advisors say the same thing. You have my email address, drop me a mail, just ask me to find your information. I will do that. I will speak to one of the other 3,000 advisors and I will get you that information. And the best thing about this, it's fully funded. So it's free at the point of use for all of you, wherever you are in those 60 countries. There are other things, IPR and so on and so forth, but I think the main strength is in that understanding the legalities, the law that happens in that area. The final part is our innovation support that we do. We actively go out looking for calls and looking for partners. So as I mentioned on the partnership database, this idea that people are out there saying, I found a call, I need a partner that does this, can you find me somebody? Not only do they do that through the database, but I get my clients come to me and say, great, I've got this call, have a look at it, I need to find 2 partners. Ideally, I need one doing this, I need one doing that, can you help me? I then reach out to our network and we do that. We find those partners for you. It's important that we do that. It's part of our value add, if you like. The innovation management services we offer, obviously that kind of goes hand in hand with Horizon 2020. And our team, we actively encourage organisations to use the ISO standard TC 279, innovation management. It's not compulsory, but it's worth you knowing about it, and we've adopted it. And obviously technology transfer is there as a given. The organisation has a number of missions that it does, and I use that term loosely because it was only recently we decided to start using the term missions again, but in essence, we are taking you to overseas territories to actually experience what it's like. You very kindly touched on this a little earlier, Alan. I just wanted to put that up on screen so you had it. Now, I've been laying these things around everywhere, so I hope you've seen them. It's this. And if you want to come along to it, please take note of the closing date. It's Tuesday, the 25th of September. The itinerary, you get a briefing when you're in South Korea. You're going to visit a research facility. You'll then have a networking dinner. You'll then go to a parts and components exhibition. The following day, you'll go to the JEC Asia International Composites event. You'll then do a company visit. You'll then have a networking reception. You'll then come home, and then people like me will then reach out to you and say, how did you get on? Who do you need to speak to? How can we make this happen? Let's break down those barriers. Let's get as many partnership opportunities lined up as you can possibly get. So if you have the time and the appetite, and this is your sweet spot, do look for it. And try and sign up. So in conclusion, I would say simply this. If you're an SME currently operating, if you have something unique and you have aspirations to not only grow but also internationalise, then I would be delighted, along with the other 3,000 advisors in our team, to speak to you. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. Now, this is a pitch session, so could I ask Chris Bojwani from AI, to deliver his pitch. So we're going to hold you to 5 minutes. Sorry about that.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to my company, AI. And our mission is to solve and design materials problems and engineering problems. And the way we do it is we apply deep neural networks to large data sets. So this could be imaging data from SEMs, TEMs, processing data, which we'll then use to identify hidden structures. So, for example, we can use a compression engine, and we can take discretized variables and form a continuous variable, which you can see around about in the middle. Sorry, that's not working. And then we can optimize for a basket of variables and determine, for example, in this example, what molecular structures would be most fitting for the problem that we're trying to solve. So here it is in action. Molecular structure data goes through the compression engine, and we can reveal hidden structures, overlay some parameters, and optimize. And due to time constraints, I won't go into all the other models we can build, but there's stuff for fabrication of components, imaging technologies for detecting, say, microstructural features, and also component building again as well. So if this is of any interest to you, please come and have a chat with me later on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, can I call Ben May from Circular Devices and Interactual Ltd.
So, a couple of years ago, I was at the National Manufacturing Debate at Cranfield University, and there was some great presentations made by the likes of Rolls-Royce and Siemens on the state of play in terms of Fourth Industrial Revolution. But one of the I can't say this is correct, but one of the statements made was that in the UK, 80% plus of UK manufacturing industry consists of businesses of 20 people or less. Now, I don't know the truth of that. That might be just at the greasy end. I don't know which is the end that I employ, but certainly that's my experience, is that that's how it is. And And so I was concerned that a lot of these solutions that are out there were too greenfield, too front end. So I started to explore, because my business, Interactual, does a little bit what the high value manufacturing catapults do, but for businesses of 1-2 people, startups, little businesses, so very much at the bottom end. The other thing I also do is I tend to help businesses to manage business growth between TRL3 and TRL6, and because I'm doing that, I'm helping them to find manufacturing resources, which is quite often these little businesses that constitute this 80%. So there's one in every industrial estate with the word precision in it. They're there everywhere. And what I've noticed is that these businesses, a lot of them aren't even at in the third industrial revolution, let alone the fourth. They're not even digital. At the moment, I will send CAD data to a manufacturer in one of these small businesses. They'll say, sorry, I can't take it, I need a drawing. And that's still prevalent today. So my other role as Circular Devices under this project, I've actually been running for Circular Devices a couple of H2020 projects already, Sustainably Smart and Poly CE. And what we've developed within Circular Devices is a simple modular IoT hub solution, which I'm looking now to help solve this problem. I want to solve a problem where we can put very easy tech into legacy equipment already in these manufacturers that is a suite of, that is modularized as a suite of sensors, but most importantly, this is an area of industry where currently people aren't, they're not digital natives. This is an aging population. These are people who are very definitely analog. So it has to be Lego bricks. It has to be plug and play. It has to be as simple to implement as possible. Otherwise, they just won't do it. So that's what I'm looking to do. So I'm making a plea. I'm looking for a project that is based around, yes, 4 IR, but let's also perhaps do a bit of 3.5 industrial revolution as well, rather than full 4, because at the moment I feel the gap between actually the long tail of our, especially in the UK and probably across Europe, this is true, the long tail of our supply chain in the UK is getting disenfranchised from the front end, from a technical perspective, or from a comms perspective. They're not able to do what we want in terms of 4IR, which is supposed to be full integration from concept through to production, but also full integration down the supply chain. And there's a lot of our industry is getting left behind. If we let that happen, we let a big chunk of our industrial sector go behind, and we lose out on the value that it can bring. So that's what I'm looking for. It's just a plea. If you've got a project, and include us in that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Next colleague asks Samir Ratika from University of Cranfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. So I'm Dr. Samir Rahatekar. I'm from Cranfield University Enhanced Composites Center for, does it work? No. All right. Enhanced Composites Center for Innovation and Science. Before I explain more about what we do as a center, Cranfield University is explicitly postgraduate training only, ranked in top 50 for aerospace, mechanical and manufacturing. So highly focused on postgraduate training and research. The center I work in, Enhanced Composites and Structure Center, is a world-leading lightweight composites manufacturing center. In terms of what we do, is transforming advanced materials into engineering products and solutions. So we go all the way from nanomaterials manufacturing, graphene manufacturing, carbon nanotubes, integrating into advanced composites, carbon fibers, and making use of them for aerospace structures. On the left, you'll see the number of companies we've worked with. We also work with renewable nanomaterials. So nanomaterials derived from cellulose-based plants, nanocrystals derived from wood tunicates, and integrate again. Our core business is composites, manufacturing composites. So integrating these sustainable composites in materials which are used for lightweight structures. That's the airfield. We are only UK university, perhaps very few in Europe, which has its own airport. If you haven't been there, I invite you to come visit us. And we also have a recently funded £35 million funding on Aerospace Integration Research Center. So not only we manufacture lightweight structures, there's also a dedicated space for integrating that lightweight structure to aircraft components. Okay, so that's the background. What is the project idea? What we are interested in it, or what is our core business as my specialty and our group head specialty is large-scale synthesis of nanocarbon, including carbon nanotubes and graphene, and scaling of that to build composite materials. So this is a chart which gives a comparison of carbon nanotubes, mechanical properties as well as functional electrical and thermal conductivity. As you can see, far better than traditional fibers, carbon fibers and Kevlar. Certainly in terms of electrical conductivity and thermal conductivity, mechanical properties are at par with carbon fiber. Also, individual carbon nanotubes far better than carbon fiber. However, the biggest challenge is how to scale those properties, because that graph or that table is slightly misleading because I'm comparing a nanoscale material with continuous fibers. And that's a bit of a problem because nanomaterials don't always scale. And that's the challenge we face for industrial use. How can we scale these into continuous fibers and mats so that we can use it for continuous carbon fiber and carbon nanotube composite production? And that's what we've been doing for last many years, mainly my colleague, Professor Koziol. He developed this process of manufacturing carbon nanotubes using gas phase reactor and make a continuous fiber and films from this gas phase reactor, which can be spun at relatively high speeds, several meters, tens of meters. So you can make it at industrial scale. I would say large scale rather than industrial scale, certainly a lot larger than what we do in academic area. In terms of its mechanical process, so what you're seeing in the extreme left picture is the top view of, bottom view of that reactor, spinning fibers continuously. In terms of mechanical properties, they are tensile strength-wise, they're almost there, as good as carbon fiber. Thermal conductivity and electrical conductivity better than carbon fiber. Yeah, almost done. So we can then also manufacture carbon nanotube fibers or films integrated with carbon fiber composites. That's essentially same structure you would use for wings or aircraft structure. And that's the cross-sectional area of carbon fiber coated with carbon nanotubes. So it's a traditional manufacturing process by which we can integrate relatively large-scale carbon nanotube films and then integrate it with composites manufacturing. That way we get a conducting coating on the surface with 400% improvement in electrical surface conductivity. Where is it used? Potentially will be very useful for lightning strike protection, EMI shielding, electrostatic dissipation, for abrasion resistance, improved scratch resistance. So what we are looking for is industrial partners in this area, in general, coatings, anti-scratch resistance, or surface conductivity. I'm happy to talk with the rest of you for any further collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, can I ask Ushpal Thind of Graphene Enabled Systems, please?
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Ushpal Thind from Graphene Enabled Systems. My colleague, Dr. Gareth Jones, is also here today. Those are our contact details. So just to quickly overview what we do, we sit within the 2D materials ecosystem at University of Manchester. There are several ways that we interact with the market. There's a lot of research and activity going on around graphene and 2D materials at the University of Manchester. We ourselves, starting from the far left there, we ourselves, our main activity is spin-out support services. So that's academic spin-outs, academic-led spin-outs. We support them to produce product demonstrators, robust business plans, management support, and securing investment. Also, there is UMIP, which is the IP agency for the University of Manchester. They are involved in market research, obviously patent filing, and third-party licensing of IP. Then you have the NGI, the National Graphene Institute. That is for academic-led R&D. The two Nobel laureates who received the Nobel Prize for isolating graphene are based there, and there's over 250 researchers there. There's the Graphene Engineering and Innovation Centre, known as the GEEK, which is supposed to be the step after the NGI for industry-led R&D and advanced material manufacturing. That's opening later this year, next month. And then there's several other mechanisms where we collaborate with external partners. So there's basically many ways to collaborate with research going on at University of Manchester. So what graphene-enabled systems in particular offers to supply chain partners is expertise in applying 2D materials, access to new markets, and opportunities to co-develop or license intellectual property. For OEMs, we offer the opportunity to gain competitive advantage through early adoption of nanomaterials in your products. And for investors, we offer high-value, de-risked investment opportunities with clear target markets, a rigorous business plan to support it, full financial projections, and fully functioning product demonstrators. So the concept is graphene-enabled systems is a bridge between the University of Manchester research and industry, taking technology from low TRL levels and moving towards a viable product at TRL level 5 or 6. In the process, we reduce the investment risk and obviously add value to the businesses that we create. So we are looking for supply chain partners, systems manufacturers, and obviously because we're dealing with startup businesses, always institutional and angel investors. We have pre-seed investment stage spin-out businesses in the following fields of robotics, including technologies such as tactile sensors, haptics, e-skin, consumer electronics, touch interfaces and in-mold structural electronics, water purification technologies, RO and membrane filtrations, pollution monitoring of various gases, printed electronics for battery electrodes and electrochemical sensors, and polymer composites, including elastomers, thermoplastics, and biopolymers. So we welcome inquiries in all these fields. Thank you. And we've recently launched, we've recently achieved seed funding for a new business called Graphene, which provides expert services in developing 2D material and elastomer composites for the target market of end users and manufacturers of elastomer materials. That's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Next, can I invite Dr. Imtiaz Ansari from Kingston University.
So hi there, I'm Imtiaz Ansari from Kingston University. So yeah, Kingston University, what we are, what we do. We are a higher education institution and the largest in the southwest London. We have over 20,000 students and over 2,000 staff members from 140 countries. So we are really multicultural and diverse. We have got a good relationship with St. George's University, London, Seagull, because we have the joint faculty for health sciences. So that means our staff and students, they work there and study there, and vice versa. Kingston University has been continuously ranked among the top 150 in most international institutions. It has been top ranked for the most startups for the graduates continuously. It based on the 4 faculties spread over the 4 campuses, and we do the research in all those areas, and 90% of our research is internationally recognized. So project idea and what Kingston can offer. So well, institutionally, as you saw in the previous slide, we do the whole spectrum of teaching and learning and the research. So yes, so we are interested in all the area of the Horizon 2020. But some of the calls specific to today is one of the for the mental health in workplace. And this is using different approaches on the cognitive health. And the ICT 25-2018 called, there is one, interactive technology, that is. So next month, I think, is the deadline. We are still looking for some partners. Then, of course, there is one NMBP 01-2018. Again, on the test pilot we are looking for. And there's another one, 06, Open Innovation Trade Investment Nanopharmaceutical Production. So these are some of the calls our academics are interested in working on, because they have already done some feasibility studies, and they brought the TRL from 1 to about 3 actually. So they want to take it further, looking for the mainly partners throughout the supply chain. What we have to offer, unique selling point, well, we have good track record in securing the funding from the European Commission, and also through the Innovate UK. And we have the relevant expertise capabilities and a whole set of tools and instrumentations available to deliver those projects. What we are looking for, basically looking for the consortia to where we can join and offer our expertise, and those could be through various sectors like automotive, aerospace, ICT, robotics, and health and related technology. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I next ask Patrick Hall of Malvern Panalytical? Thank you.
So thank you, and thanks to the KTM for putting this meeting together. So yeah, I'm Patrick Hall from Malvern Panalytical. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but we came about from 2 independent companies, Malvern Instruments and Panalytical. And it took 9 months to decide the name should be, the combined entity should be Malvern Panalytical. So we're about 2,000 people worldwide. We're headquartered here in the UK in Malvern, just south of Worcester, south of Birmingham, and over in the Netherlands, in East Netherlands in Almelo. Malvern, what do we do? So we both, and now as a joint entity, we develop and manufacture scientific instruments for materials characterization. So in the past, Malvern Instruments has primarily been about particle characterization, so powder or suspensions, and Panalytical's expertise is in the area of X-ray characterization, so X-ray diffraction or X-ray fluorescence primarily. So as I say, we develop and manufacture, for the most part, premium characterization equipment. So there's a long list of acronyms, but just to go through some of the main ones there then. So size exclusion chromatography, dynamic light scattering, laser diffraction and X-ray diffraction, X-ray fluorescence, that's isothermal calorimetry for protein interactions, and some automated image analysis systems. So we have expertise in supporting both making the measurements and interpreting those measurements, but our day-to-day job is developing, manufacturing, selling these technologies. We contribute on multiple ISO and CERN and ASTM standardisation committees. So in terms of looking through the list of calls that are coming up next year, these are the three that we've identified as probably the most relevant to what we do. We're fairly open-minded, but certainly the real-time nanocharacterization technologies, we have 3 technologies that do nanocharacterization. They're all offline measurements, so they're standalone scientific instruments where you bring your sample to them, make the measurement. If there are any end users that have a particular desire to make these online measurements instead, so real-time measurements, we would like to understand your requirements and see if developing such a solution makes sense. Similarly, if you have technologies or capability to augment some of our existing platforms, existing systems, we'd like to hear from you. Then the other 2 there are safe by design from science to regulation. So our systems tend to be, we tend to take them from early stage and try to progress them as fast as possible into regulatory standards. So we can help. We feel we can probably help in projects in that area. And one of the areas that we're, because we do powder characterization and liquid characterization, both from the point of view of size analysis, shape analysis, the rheology of the materials, then we're looking a lot at additive manufacturing, and we're working with a number of both companies and universities in projects in this area. But if there's anyone that's interested in looking at a potential call in this area, then please do contact us. So as I say, thank you. As I say, we're open-minded about exactly what we're looking for, but primarily it's going to be around end users who have key characterization challenges, understand what those challenges are, why they're important to partners, how they would value the solutions. If there are research groups who believe they can help us in our development of these technologies, would love to hear from you. And similarly, historically, some of the ways that Malvern Panalytical has grown has been through acquisition of smaller technologies that we've helped bring on and develop. So if there are established startups that are aligned to our market area, again, we'd like to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Could I ask, Rich Walker from the Shadow Robot Company.
Hi all. So we're a robotics technology development SME. We're based in London and in Spain if you need a non-UK partner for a project. We've been involved in European projects since the back end of FP6. We kind of know the system pretty well. We're fairly well embedded in the European project. We're on the board of directors of one of the PPPs. We do that kind of thing, as well as various advisory roles in the UK and so forth. But what we actually do on a daily basis is we build hands for robots, not hands for humans. Prosthetics is a totally different market. We don't work in it. If you want to talk to somebody who does prosthetics, I can point you at a bunch of companies that do that. I don't ever want to work in a market where the key growth drivers are landmines. So we work on hands for robots. Why do we build hands for robots? Firstly, because it's very hard. Nobody in the world was able to do it when we started doing it. We still build the best thing in the world that's available commercially. They go all over the world to people doing R&D in robotics and looking at new applications of robots. So we sell them to everyone from OpenAI to professors in Japan and China who are doing stuff that we, frankly, don't have the PhDs to understand. What are we trying to do now? Well, we're looking at taking these robot hands and getting them to solve real-world problems. So that might be doing complex manipulation tasks. I used to say things like that's currently impossible for a robot to do, but OpenAI have managed to do that, so now I need some more challenging tasks. If you have problems that currently only humans can solve, and you want machines to do them, then maybe using a human-like robot hand is the right approach for doing that. We're trying to do that using technologies like motion capture and replay, using machine learning systems, using planning systems. We have a lot of partnerships in the robotics community, so we can bring other people along to solve some of those hard problems while you get on with actually applying it to your real-world challenges. We're also very excited and interested by spaces around teleoperation, around handling difficult and dangerous objects, whether those might be highly cytotoxic substances, things that you haven't even characterized the toxicity of, or things that are just plain nasty and glow in the dark. This technology can be used there. Maybe we should be exploring how to apply that. We're applying some more industrial technology as well. We're developing a new system which is basically capable of picking things up and holding them. Again, it's one of those problems that people say, oh yeah, well, you know, I can go to Shunk, I can go to Festo, I can buy a gripper, that picks things up. Yes, it picks up the things that it was specified to pick up. But if you have 100 different objects, it'll pick up 90 of them. And if you have 1,000 different objects, you're going to end up with a human doing the picking up because the robot can't do that. With this sort of technology, if you give us a 3D model of an object, we think we should be able to pick it up if it's within the payload spec for this, and we'll know how well we picked it up, and so the likelihood that we won't drop it while trying to do something else with it. And again, this is technology that hasn't really been applied industrially, and we're hoping that we can do that over the next few years. I seem to have a completely blank slide here, so on that point I'll conclude and say I'm around all day. Do come and talk to me if you want to apply robot hands to anything, or if you have technology that you think will be interesting for robot hands, in particular skin. We're very excited by skin.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go a little bit out of order. Can I ask Dr. Marina Fuentes of UCL to come up next? Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marina Fuentes, and I am the Innovation Enterprise Officer for the Faculty of Mathematical and Physical Sciences at UCL. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about two of the research groups who are working on areas that are relevant for upcoming funding calls. The first one is the Clean Materials Technology Group, which is led by Professor Jawad Dar, and this group specializes in the synthesis of nanoparticles from metal salts using supercritical water as the solvent for the reaction. This method has the advantage of being continuous, is a flow system, is sustainable, is rapid, and is reproducible. Materials that are accessible through this methodology include metal oxides, sulfides, phosphates, and some metals. It is also possible to synthesize coated nanoparticles by incorporating surface additives into the process. So the group has 3 different supercritical water reactors operating at different scales, going from the gram scale up to the pilot scale, which can produce up to 2 kilograms per hour of nanopowder. So if you, for example, had in mind a particular composition for a nanoparticle, they can do that for you. They can make up to 66 unique compositions in a day. They would then measure the properties, select the best performing materials, scale it up, and test them in a wide range of applications. So examples of applications they work with include battery and non-battery energy storage and conversion. So for example, the nanoparticles can be used for cathodes and anodes in lithium batteries, but also sodium and magnesium batteries. And the magnesium battery is interesting because it's much safer than lithium batteries. Magnesium doesn't form the spikes that you normally see in lithium batteries, and therefore they are much safer to use. If you were interested in nanoparticles with very high surface areas, that's something they could help you with. These type of materials are ideal for applications such as supercapacitors, but also for catalysts. So they could test these nanoparticles as catalysts for oxygen reduction in fuel cells, for example. Further applications would be, for example, using the coated nanoparticles in a magnetic dispersion that can then be used as a 3D printable ink. So I'm going to stop here regarding this research group. The take-home message is that they can synthesize nanoparticles with targeted compositions, test the properties, scale it up, and test these particles in a wide range of applications. So now moving on, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Thomas Young Centre, which is the London Centre for Materials Modelling. This centre gathers more than 100 research groups from different London universities, and they are very dedicated to solve industry problems. So if you are interested in understanding a little bit about how about materials, I recommend to get in touch with them, and they would be able to put you in contact with the research group most appropriate to look into your particular problem. And just to give you a flavor of the different simulations that they work with, starting at the top left, the first picture is a picture of a pharma compound. The second one on the right is a nanomaterial. Next one is the active site of an enzyme. The fourth one is graphene. The one at the bottom on the right-hand side, this is a simulation of how an X-ray damages a material. The next one is a clay-oil interface, and the last one is a bit different. This is an engineering simulation which is used to look at large systems, such as how the air flows through an airplane window, for example. And to finish, I would like to highlight the work of Professor David Bowler, because Professor Bowler has developed a DFT code which works very well with systems with very high number of atoms. So the code that he's developed has demonstrated modeling of systems with 2 million atoms. And this is particularly relevant for some of the upcoming funding calls because it could be applied to biological systems. So there is a scope for using this method to look into, for example, the prediction of toxicological properties, particularly in terms of looking at the binding of toxic molecules to cell receptors. And with this I finish. If you would like to know some more details, talk to me. I have some leaflets as well. I'll leave it here.
Okay, excuse me.